Have you ever wondered, long before wedding rings, long before flowers, long before dating apps like Tinder, how did prehistoric humans find love? Imagine a world without jewelry stores, without candlelit dinners, without even the simple word marriage. Instead, early humans lived in small groups, surrounded by forests, rivers, and the constant struggle to survive. Yet even in that harsh and wild setting, they still looked for partners, formed bonds, and created their own strange little rituals of love. A prehistoric man could not buy chocolates, and a prehistoric woman had no wedding dress to wear. Instead, love was expressed in other ways, through a gift of food, through a careful dance by the fire, or even through scars and painted symbols on the body. Some groups believed that strength alone was proof of love, while others thought a shared meal of roasted roots or meat was a promise of a future together. To us today, these customs might seem strange, even amusing. But for them, it was a matter of life and survival. Love was not just romance, it was safety, it was the chance to raise children, and it was the hope of keeping a tribe alive in a dangerous world. In tonight's Sleepy History Tale, we will explore these weird and ancient rituals of love. You will hear about courtship dances that lasted all night, symbolic offerings that replaced rings, and traditions that may seem both wild and surprisingly gentle. So close your eyes, relax, and let your mind wander back to the age of stone and fire, where the first stories of human love quietly began. Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into something strange, dreamy, and maybe just a little ridiculous: prehistoric love rituals. Picture yourself thousands of years ago in a cave that smells like smoke, wet animal hide, and that suspicious cousin of yours who hasn't invented soap yet. The fire is flickering, throwing orange shapes across the walls, and all around you figures shuffle and grunt. You're trying to figure out if one of those grunts means "I like you" or "pass me the marrow bone." Either way, the stakes feel absurdly high because out here you probably won't survive this winter without a partner to share the workload. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and your local time in the comments. I always love to see where and when you're listening in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cave around you hums with the sound of people gathering. Imagine 50 or so, not the 1,000-person crowd you'd see at a modern concert, but enough to make you feel like the social event of the season has kicked off. Torches stick into cracks in the rock, and a central fire gives everyone something to stare at when eye contact feels too intense. Early humans didn't have apps or swiping gestures. They had firelight and a kind of awkward choreography that made sense only if you'd been raised inside this community since birth. The so-called cave fire courtship might look like stumbling, but to them it's structured. Archaeologists have long argued about whether these group gatherings were primarily for survival planning, sharing resources, plotting hunts, or for social mingling that often led to mating opportunities. Historians still argue whether the emphasis was communal strategy or romance disguised as ritual. But when you're sitting cross-legged, nervously picking dirt from your fingernails, it feels a lot like the prehistoric version of a school dance. A man, if you can call him that when he's barely out of his teens, starts clapping two sticks together. Others join in, stomping their feet against the stone floor. Suddenly a circle forms. The stomps echo like a drum, making your chest vibrate. The dance begins. Bodies lean, sway, and hop, not because it's graceful, but because motion looks impressive in firelight. If you've ever seen someone lean too close to a campfire trying to look cool, you'll recognize the risk. At least once a night, someone probably singes an eyebrow off. You're trying to appear attentive without looking desperate. It's a skill passed down through generations. Keep your eyes open, but not too wide. Nod occasionally, but don't drool. One woman across the fire glances at you. She's decorated her hair with feathers stolen from some unfortunate bird. In this smoky light, it looks less like a crown and more like she fell face first into a chicken coop, but the intention shines through. She's making an effort. Fact: fire gatherings were essential to Stone Age life, not just for warmth, but for building bonds and exchanging stories. Quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest the dancing wasn't merely for fun. It might have doubled as a way to show off stamina, coordination, or even fertility. Picture your ancestor trying to moonwalk over a bed of hot embers.
Romance, but with a hint of don't trip or you'll be tonight's barbecue.
One elder, probably the closest thing here to a chaperone, sits off to the side. His job? Watch, judge, and occasionally shout advice like not too close or use your knees. The community runs on experience, and the elder knows a thing or two about which clumsy movements lead to bruises versus which lead to marriage. At one point, a couple breaks from the circle, stepping toward the shadows near the cave wall. No one calls them out.
Everyone knows what's happening.
Privacy doesn't exist in the modern sense, but slipping away from the group is a signal as loud as any neon sign. You glance after them, equal parts envious and relieved, because you're not entirely sure you could pull off that move tonight.
The ritual is less about fireworks and more about slow burn connection. You lauk wien somjone stumbles. They laugh back. You share a roasted root, passing it hand to hand until the heat burns your fingertips.
Little gestures matter. You think maybe romance isn't so different after all. Historians still puzzle over how much of these gatherings revolved around mating versus spiritual ceremony. Was the dancing a prayer for successful hunts, a plea for safe births? Or was it basically a prehistoric singles mixer with just enough religious flair to make it feel official? No one agrees, but you, sitting here by the fire, can sense the tension buzzing in the air.
As the night drags on, the fire dims and the circle slows.
People peel off in pairs or drift toward sleeping mats. Sparks fly upward, disappearing into the cave's darkness. You wrap your hide tighter around your shoulders, wondering if tomorrow you'll try harder in the circle or maybe invent some new gesture that says interested but mysterious.
You're not alone in the tucked.
Even tens of thousands of years later, people will look at these gatherings, scratch their heads, and wonder if humanity's first true art form wasn't painting or carving, but the awkward, hopeful dance around a fire. You wake the next morning with the smoky smell of last night's fire still clinging to your skin. The cave feels quieter now, though small sounds echo, children laughing, stone striking stone, a cough in the shadows. Someone is already working outside, and you hear the steady clack, clack, clack of flint on flint. It's not just background noise. It's the sound of survival, and oddly enough, it's also the sound of courtship. Because here, stone tools aren't just tools, they're prehistoric love letters. You wander closer, watching a young man kneeling with a block of flint. His hands move with deliberate precision.
Chips fly like sparks, and soon a teardrop chapate hentax emerges.
To us, it's a sharp chunk of rock. To them, it's craftsmanship, skill, even charm. Archaeologists have actually found hand axes so finely made that they're considered too perfect to have been used. Think about that. Someone spent hours carefully sculpting a tool that might never cut a single hide. Historians still argue whether these immaculate axes were practical spares or basically Stone Age engagement rings. You sit cross-legged nearby, pretending to pick at some roots but actually watching the rhythm of his hands. The process is mesmerizing.
Chip, rotate, strecke.
Each blow is purposeful, shaping not just stone but reputation. When he holds it up in the sunlight, the surface gleams. It's sharp enough to skin a deer, but what it really skins is the thin barrier between survival and admiration. In this world, attraction is tied to usefulness. You can't simply tell someone you're reliable, you show it in every strike of stone. A well-crafted tool means food, shelter, protection. And yes, it means you're worth spending a long, cold winter with. Mainstream historians accept that tool-making was vital for survival, but the quirky tidbit is this. Some researchers believe certain tools were overbuilt, functioning less as knives and more as prehistoric jewelry. Imagine showing up on a date today with a perfectly balanced axe instead of flowers. It's not so different, you're just saying, look, I can keep you fed. One woman passes by, glancing at the axe maker's progress. She pauses, tilts her head, then continues walking. Was that approval? Was it dismissal?
You can't tell.
But the man's shoulders straighten and his strikes grow quicker, sharper, as if her brief glance gave him fuel. You realize this is the quiet dance of attraction, no stomping circle around the fire tonight, just the focused creation of something meant to impress. Nearby, another young man is less skilled. His flint keeps shattering wrong, leaving jagged lumps instead of smooth blades.
Hey, Mutter's frustrated.
People notice. They always notice. In this society, clumsy napping might doom your chances at finding a partner, or at least relegate you to the bottom of the admiration ladder. Historians still argue whether skill gaps led to clear social hierarchies, or whether everyone just shrugged and said, well, he's better at gathering roots. Either way, when survival depends on efficiency, skill becomes magnetic.
There smells like crushed rock and fresh earth.
Little shards scatter across the ground, glinting like prehistoric confetti. You think about how weird it is. The very objects archaeologists dig up thousands of years later, carefully labeled and displayed in museums, were once sweaty, nervous love notes. No handwriting, no ink, just flint. And if you squint, maybe a little desperation. At one point, the skilled napper presents his finished hand axe to an elder. The old man weighs it, nods slowly, then sets it back down with approval. Everyone nearby pretends not to notice, but you catch the sidelong glances. That nod wasn't just about a tool, it was an endorsement, almost like swiping right in front of the whole group. You pick up a discarded shard, sharp on one side, smooth on the other. It fits oddly well in your palm.
For a second, you imagine crafting one yourself.
But then you remember how much patience it takes, and patience isn't exactly your strongest quality. Still, you can't help but think, if someone handed you a flawless hand axe, it would feel less like a weapon and more like a promise. Fact, some Acheulean hand axes discovered in Africa and Europe are enormous, too big for practical use. They may have been showpieces, designed to impress rather than function. Quirky tidbit, one theory even suggests that they were early forms of costly signaling, like a peacock's tail, so extravagant and impractical that they proved the maker had enough resources to waste time. Historians still argue whether these axes were flaunted during gatherings or tucked away as prized possessions. Either way, you know one thing, romance in the Stone Age had sharp edges. Later in the day, as shadows lengthen, you notice a small exchange. The axe maker quietly places his tool near the sleeping mat of the feather-haired woman you saw last night. She doesn't say anything, just sits nearby later, gently turning it over in her hands. She smiles, not a wide grin, more like a secret acknowledgement. And then she sets it down carefully, as though handling something delicate. The whole act lasts less than a minute, but you're certain you've just witnessed the Stone Age equivalent of slipping a note into someone's locker. You stretch out on your own mat, still clutching the shard you picked up. Your mind drifts between thoughts of survival and thoughts of companionship, because out here, the two are stitched together like hide and sinew. A partner isn't just someone to laugh with, they're someone to sharpen tools with, to carry meat back with, to share warmth when the wind howls. And you think, maybe the hand axe, with its balance of beauty and utility, is the perfect symbol of love after all. It's dangerous if mishandled, dazzling when polished, and utterly necessary when times get rough. The cave is quiet again, but your eyes wander toward the walls.
At first glance you see bison, horses, and maybe a woolly rhino charging across the stone surface. But if you lean closer in the dim light of a smoky torch, you start to wonder if some of these paintings weren't just about hunting. Maybe, just maybe, some were about flirting. You trace the outlines with your eyes, red ochre smeared into curves, black charcoal outlining figures, hands pressed like signatures. The mainstream fact you know, cave art is found all across Europe, Africa, and Asia, some of it dating back more than 30,000 years. The quirky tidbit you suspect, some of these paintings might not have been serious religious statements or hunting blueprints at all. They might have been essentially ancient doodles meant to impress someone special. And historians still argue whether the famous animal scenes were sacred ritual, artistic bragging, or, in a few cases, just someone showing off their paint skills to catch an admirer's eye. You picture it, a young person crouched with a lamp made of animal fat, dipping a brush made from chewed stick fibers into ochre. They're not just painting a bison for fun, they're carefully exaggerating the horns, making it strong, making it fierce. Because strength matters. And when a potential mate sees the finished wall, they'll think, wow, this artist must be connected to power, to hunting luck, to spiritual energy. It's Stone Age pickup artistry, literally etched in stone. Your ears catch a giggle from across the chamber. Two youths are whispering near a cluster of handprints. Some prints are small, clearly from children. Others are larger, with long fingers, palms pressed hard against the rock. One of the girls reaches out, placing her own hand against the ancient red outline. It fits perfectly. The boy beside her nudges closer, laughing nervously. You think, there it is, that universal instinct to leave your mark and maybe link it with someone else's. Forget carving initials into a tree trunk. Here, it's palms dipped in pigment, overlapping like the first couple selfies. The torch flickers, and you notice symbols scratched over an older painting. Not animals this time, just abstract shapes, zigzags, spirals, dots. You tilt your head, trying to decode it. Some researchers suggest these markings were early attempts at communication, maybe calendars, maybe clan symbols. But another theory whispers something more playful. What if they were inside jokes, or even coded love notes? Historians still argue whether these symbols had a deep ritual purpose or were casual graffiti layered onto sacred art. You imagine someone sneaking in late, drawing a crude spiral next to a grand bison, just to leave a little wink for someone else to find. Zaya is cool and the stone beneath your fingers is damp. You smell the earthy tang of ochre dust, faintly metallic, clinging to the cracks. If you close your eyes, you can almost see the artist kneeling, mixing pigment with spit or animal fat, humming to themselves, hoping their creation will catch attention. It's not so different from sketching someone's portrait in a notebook during math class, except here the canvas lasts for millennia. You overhear the feather-haired woman from before chatting with another girl. She's gesturing toward a painted deer, pointing out its flowing lines. The way she tilts her head, half proud, half conspiratorial, makes you suspect she knows who painted it. Maybe she was the reason it was painted in the first place. The boy who left it there, did he sneak in after a long hunt, hoping she'd notice the next day? You grin to yourself, realizing prehistoric romance had as much suspense as any modern crush. Fact: in places like Chauvet Cave in France and Altamira in Spain, researchers have studied hundreds of paintings, often layered across generations. Quirky tidbit: in some cases, different artists painted on the same wall centuries apart, suggesting the cave was revisited like a community canvas. Imagine lovers centuries apart leaving their own additions, unknowingly collaborating on a single prehistoric mural. Historians still argue whether this layering was deliberate ritual renewal or just casual reuse of convenient walls. Your gaze lingers on one peculiar figure. It's not an animal, but something in between, half human, half beast, drawn with horns and a stick-like body.
Anthropologists often call these therianthropes, figures mixing human and animal features. Some think they represent shamans, others think they're mythical beings. But part of you wonders if this too might have been flirtation, an artist dressing themselves up in paint as something larger than life. See me not as an ordinary man, the drawing says, but as one with the strength of the stag. It's basically ancient role play, captured forever in ochre. One of the children scurries past you, carrying a lump of red powder. He grins, leaving smudges across his cheeks as though he's playing warrior. Adults laugh gently, but you can't help thinking, this is practice too. Paint isn't only for walls. It's for skin, for hair, for ceremonies where people show themselves at their best. And if you smear it across your chest in just the right way, maybe someone across the firelight will notice. The room grows warmer with so many bodies gathered, breath misting faintly in the light. People settle near the walls, leaning against centuries of painted animals. Someone hums, low and rhythmic. A girl begins tracing the outline of a bison with her fingertip, following its curve as though memorizing it. The boy beside her mirrors her motion, his hand hovering just above hers. I almost laugh, it's the oldest trick in the book, touching the same line, pretending it's about art when it's really about closeness. You realize that these caves weren't just galleries. They were social hubs, places of wonder where light flickered across art, making it seem alive. Picture a painted horse galloping in firelight, shadows turning static figures into moving owners. Imagine the gasp when a girl first surveys that illusion. Who wouldn't be charmed by someone who could make stone come alive? And yet, despite all this, the scholars today still squabble endlessly. Were the caves holy temples? Were they ancient lecture halls teaching hunting strategies? Or were they in part cozy corners for young people to impress each other with talent and imagination? No answer sticks, but you sit here in the flickering glow, feeling strongly that love, or at least attraction, was hidden in the brushstrokes. When the torches burn low, people start to leave, one by one. The chamber grows quiet, the animals settling back into stillness. You remain for a moment longer, tracing a spiral with your finger, thinking how strange it is to witness messages from hearts beating tens of thousands of years ago. They didn't know you'd ever see them. They just wanted someone close by to notice. And that's the charm of it all. Prehistoric romance painted in shadows, whispering through ochre lines, never quite saying what it means, but hoping you'll understand. The smoke from the cave fires has barely faded when the air outside fills with a new smell, meat roasting over open flames. You step into the daylight, blinking against the glare, and see the whole community buzzing like bees around a hive. Today is not just any day, it's a feast day. And in this world, feasts aren't only about filling empty stomachs. They are matchmaking stages full of subtle gestures, glances, and yes, even who gets the biggest chunk of mammoth marrow. The carcass dominates the center of the camp. A mammoth felled by careful teamwork days earlier now lies carved into pieces. The bones, gleaming white and enormous, are stacked like pillars. Men sharpen stone blades against rock, women stoke fires, and children dart around, sneaking bites of fat when they think no one is watching. The smell is overwhelming, smoky, fatty, primal. Your stomach growls, but your curiosity about what's really happening here grows louder. Fact: large communal feasts are well documented in prehistoric sites. Archaeologists have uncovered massive piles of bones, sometimes arranged deliberately, suggesting big gatherings that went beyond everyday meals. Quirky tidbit: evidence from places like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic shows that mammoth bones were even used to build shelters, meaning every part of the animal played into community life. Historians still argue whether these feasts were purely about survival or also structured social events, almost prehistoric festivals where alliances, marriages, and rivalries were forged.
You crouch near the fire pit, watching as marrow bones are roasted. The rich smell makes you dizzy. One elder carefully cracks a leg bone open with a stone hammer, the sound echoing sharp across the clearing. Inside, the glistening marrow steams. Without hesitation, he passes the first chunk, not to his closest kin, but to a young woman sitting across from him. She takes it with a small smile, eyes flicking briefly toward the young hunter who killed the beast. It's not subtle. Everyone notices. You realize this feast isn't just calories, it's theater. Each portion handed out, each place where someone sits, carries meaning. Who sits near the fire shows status. Who receives the tastiest morsels reveals connections. Who dares to share with someone outside their kin signals interest or risk. It's like a high school cafeteria, except instead of trading potato chips, people are trading survival prospects. As the feast builds, the mood loosens. People laugh louder, drink fermented berries from animal skin pouches, and sing rhythmic chants. Some of the hunters exaggerate their stories, how the mammoth nearly crushed them, how they leapt aside like spirits in the wind. You can't help but smirk. Storytelling is an art, and like any art, it's partly about impressing someone on the other side of the fire. One young hunter tosses a rib the size of your arm onto the fire, then deliberately drags it closer to the girl with feathered hair, the same one who admired the hand axe in the cave. She pretends not to notice at first, poking at the flames with a stick. But when she pulls the rib free and takes a bite, grease dripping down her chin, the boy grins with pride. It's clumsy, yes, but it works. You lean back, watching the subtle game play out around you. This isn't just romance, it's negotiation. Families watch carefully. Elders whisper about alliances. Elders whisper about alliances. Two clans might be linked tonight by nothing more than a marrow bone passed across the fire. Fact: anthropologists note that in many foraging societies, food sharing is a crucial way of building relationships, both romantic and social. Quirky tidbit: some remains suggest marrow was a prized delicacy, more valued than meat itself. Historians still argue whether sharing marrow at feasts was symbolic of trust, since marrow is hidden deep in bone, requiring special effort to access. It's as if saying, "I'll share with you what's hardest to reach." The drums begin, just hollow logs and stretched hides beaten with bones. The Heichmandpuls everyone targeted the feast shifting into celebration. People clap, stomp, and sway. Children dance wildly, their movements free and silly, while adults mark time with practiced steps. You notice that pairs keep forming during the dance, two people slipping closer, brushing shoulders, sharing laughter. If last night's cave dance was awkward experimentation, tonight's feast is bold display. At one point, the feather-haired girl stands grabbing a piece of marrow bone and deliberately walks across the circle. She sits beside the axe maker, presses the bone into his hand, and leans close to whisper something. His ears turn red in the firelight. Around them, a ripple of knowing chuckles spreads. You realize you've just seen the prehistoric equivalent of a public proposal, subtle yet undeniable. The air grows heavy with smoke and song. Fires crackle, sparks fly upward into the night. Meat sizzles, fat dripping into the flames, and the smell of roasting flesh becomes almost overwhelming. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensory overload wash over you. Somewhere nearby, a young man carves a small figure into bone, his knife scraping rhythmically. Perhaps it's a charm, perhaps a gift, perhaps just nervous fidgeting while he gathers the courage to speak. As the night deepens, the feast slows. People lean back, bellies full, voices hoarse from laughter and song. Couples slip away into the shadows, just like during the fire dances. You imagine some of them retreating to huts, others disappearing into the edges of the forest where moonlight filters through the trees.
And you think about the marrow bone again, how something so small, so hidden within bone, became the centerpiece of attraction. You realize love in this age wasn't whispered poetry or candlelit dinners. It was grease on your fingers, fire on your face, marrow shared hand to hand. And somehow, that feels just as meaningful. Fact: archaeological evidence shows feasts were often seasonal, timed with migrations or big hunts. Quirky tidbit: there's speculation that sharing marrow might have had a spiritual side too, symbolizing vitality, since marrow literally makes blood. Historians still argue whether these rituals blurred the line between nourishment and magic. But sitting here with a full belly and the faint echo of laughter in the dark, you don't need scholars to tell you it was both.
As the last embers glow red, you wrap yourself in a hide and lie back on the ground. The stars glitter above vast and endless.
Your eyes grow heavy, but your mind keeps circling around a simple truth. In the Stone Age, love wasn't written in words, it was tasted in marrow, sung in story, danced in firelight. By morning, the air has cooled, the feast smells fading into ash and damp earth. But even as the fires die down, the show is far from over. Today, it's not about roasted marrow or dancing circles. Today it's about appearances, specifically who can look the most impressive while parading around with antlers strapped to their heads.
You blink at the scene unfolding before you.
A tall man strides past, the sun glinting off the polished curve of reindeer antlers perched awkwardly on his brow. They're lashed with strips of sinew, wobbling slightly as he walks. Behind him, another hunter emerges with even bigger antlers, heavy enough to make him stoop. You can't help but chuckle. This is less Fashion Week and more try not to get a neck cramp while proving you're irresistible. Fact: archaeologists have found burial sites where antlers and horns were placed deliberately with bodies, suggesting they held deep symbolic power. Quirky tidbit: in some Mesolithic graves, antlers were attached to headgear, possibly used in ceremonies that blended status, spirituality, and yes, maybe even attraction. Historians still argue whether antler crowns signaled leadership, shamanic power, or simply "look at me, I'm important."
You settle onto a rock, watching the parade.
The young men strut through the camp, turning their heads this way and that, as though to say, "See? I am strong like the stag, I am fertile like the deer, and I can balance 30 pounds of bone without collapsing." The women glance over, some hiding smiles behind their hands, others studying carefully. It's clear that this isn't random, it's performance. One boy's antlers slip sideways, dangling precariously over his ear. He fumbles, trying to tighten the sinew, but it only makes things worse. The crown lurches forward and clonks him squarely on the nose. Blood trickles instantly. The crowd bursts into laughter, and even he laughs, though his pride smarts. You think, ancient or not, fashion always has its hazards. Across the clearing, a different figure captures attention. His antlers aren't the biggest, but they've been polished smooth, the tips gleaming like ivory. He's also draped himself in a cloak of animal hide, dyed faintly red with ochre. The effect is striking, not overbearing, but controlled. You see the feather-haired girl glance in his direction. Subtle, but unmistakable. You realize the antler crown is more than costume, it's shorthand. In a society without written language, people wear symbols instead of words.
Antlers sei I am provider. Horns sei I am bold.
And when you strap them to your head and walk through camp, you're telling a story louder than any speech could manage. Fact: in many hunter-gatherer cultures, antlers were associated with regeneration, since deer shed and regrow them yearly. Quirky tidbit: some researchers suggest men wearing antlers might have imitated the mating displays of stags, literally borrowing animal charisma. Historians still argue whether women found this genuinely attractive, or whether it was just tolerated as tradition.
The sun climbs higher and the parade shifts into a kind of contest. Men gather in a circle, locking arms, testing strength, their antlers clashing like mock battles. The sound of bone striking bone echoes across the clearing. Children share, elders nod gravely, and women observe quietly. It's a performance of dominance, yes, but also of endurance. Whoever can last longest without collapsing under the awkward headgear earns admiration. You can't help but imagine the prehistoric commentary. Ah, yes, Yoker lasted 4 full clashes before his crown slipped. Very impressive neck muscles. Perfect for hauling mammoth fat. You stifle a laugh, realizing that even here, competition and attraction blend seamlessly into ritual. Nearby, a young girl experiments with smaller deer antlers, giggling as she balances them on her head. Her friends clap, chanting playfully. The elders scold half-heartedly, muttering about sacred objects, but you can see they're secretly amused. After all, practice starts young. The air smells faintly of crushed grass and sweat. Dust rises with every mock battle. The feather-haired woman stands now, adjusting her necklace of shells and watching the men clash. Her expression is hard to read, half interested, half skeptical. You wonder if she's tired of the show. After all, how many times can you watch 2 guys bonk heads before it stops being impressive? Yet when the polished antler man finally lifts his crown high and lets out a triumphant cry, she smiles just enough for him to notice. And that's all it takes. He grins like he's just brought down a mammoth single-handed. Fact, similar displays exist in animals today. Peacocks with feathers, stags with antlers, birds with elaborate dances. Quirky tidbit, some anthropologists argue that humans are just another species borrowing the same tricks, dressing up in whatever symbols are handy. Historians still argue whether these rituals were conscious strategy or instinctual mimicry of nature. As the sun dips, the parrot winds down. Antlers are set aside, some carefully, some tossed into piles. People drift back to fires, nursing bruises and egos. You sit back, watching the camp relax into laughter and chatter. For a moment, you think about modern fashion shows, about teenagers fussing with hair gel or sneakers. Maybe nothing has changed. We still crown ourselves with symbols, hoping someone across the circle notices. Later, when darkness falls, you see the polished antler man sitting with the feather-haired woman near the fire. They share a piece of roasted root, passing it hand to hand. He gestures animatedly, probably retelling his victorious clashes, though you suspect she already saw enough. She listens, nodding politely, but her eyes glint with amusement. You know she's weighing more than just antlers. And you think love in this world isn't just about survival. It's also about theater. Antler crowns might look silly, but they're serious business. They're about status, symbolism, and the endless human desire to decorate ourselves in ways that say, "Choose me." The firelight flickers, shadows bending antlers stacked nearby into strange shapes on the cave wall. They look alive like ghostly deer watching from the dark. You shiver, half spooked, half awed. You realize the crowns aren't just performance. They connect people to animals, to cycles, to something larger than themselves. And in that connection, they find both identity and intimacy. The next morning, the camp is quieter. The echoes of clashing antlers and the laughter of last night's spectacle have faded, leaving only the soft rhythm of people stirring from their hides. You walk past the smoldering fires, drawn by flashes of color that glimmer strangely against the otherwise gray world of stone and bone. At first you think it's blood or clay smeared across someone's hand. But no, it's pigment. Red ochre dust, ground fine, mixed with fat, rubbed onto skin and ornaments. Here, at last, you're seeing the earliest hints of cosmetics and jewelry, shell beads and ochre blush. A young woman kneels near a flat rock, grinding ochre into powder with deliberate strokes.
Each push of the stone releases a faint metallic smell, sharp and earthy. The dust stains her fingers, her cheeks already glowing with faint streaks of crimson. When she looks up, you notice she's lined her eyes with black charcoal, the edges smudged but striking.
She smiles faintly as if to say, "Yes, I know it looks good."
Fact: ochre is one of humanity's oldest pigments, with evidence of its use dating back at least 100,000 years. Quirky tidbit: researchers in South Africa discovered lumps of ochre stored in what might have been grinding kits, essentially prehistoric makeup bags. Historians still argue whether ochre was primarily symbolic, ritualistic, or aesthetic.
But as you watch this young woman dust her skin, it's clear beauty plays a role.
Nearby, another figure threads small shell beads onto sinew, her hands working quickly. The shells gleam faintly, their pale surfaces polished by sand and time. You wonder how far they traveled. Some beads like these have been found hundreds of miles from their original shores. That means someone, somewhere, carried them across landscapes, through danger, just to bring them here.
A gift of shells wasn't just decoration. It was proof of daring journeys, proof of effort, like showing up with roses plucked from a volcano.
You see her glance up from her beads toward a boy sitting nearby. She catches his eye, then drops the necklace back into her lap, pretending to be deeply focused. He pretends not to notice, though the tips of his ears turn red. You smirk, realizing the exchange is louder than words. Fact: archaeologists have uncovered graves where bodies were adorned with beads and ochre, suggesting these ornaments weren't only for the living. Quirky tidbit: some shells were perforated in ways that suggest deliberate threading, hinting at necklaces, bracelets, maybe even anklets. Historians still argue whether these beads served as currency, spiritual tokens, or love gifts.
You lean towards the laugh gift theory. After all, who risks life and limb to cross rivers for a shell, if not for someone special? The camp boots with small transformations.
Children run by, faces smeared with uneven streaks of pigment, giggling as elders scold them for wasting supplies. One man has rubbed ochre into his hair, making it a wild orange crown. He struts proudly, though every step sheds dust onto his shoulders. Another has streaked his arms with parallel red lines, flexing muscles for anyone willing to watch.
It's body art, but it's also statement. Look at me, I am fierce, I am bright, I am worth your attention.
You wander closer to the bead maker, watching as she threads the final shell and ties a knot. She holds the necklace up to the light. It gleams, delicate yet durable. Without hesitation, she walks across the clearing and places it gently into the hands of the boy with red ears. He looks stunned, mumbling something awkward, then slips it over his head. The shells clink softly as they rest against his chest. Around them, murmurs ripple. It's not just a gift, it's a declaration. Fact: some scholars believe bead-making was humanity's first true symbolic communication, proof that we could convey meaning beyond survival needs. Quirky tidbit: wearing beads or ochre might have been the Stone Age equivalent of relationship status. Historians still argue whether necklaces marked individuals as married, single, or part of a clan.
You imagine the awkward conversations. No, these aren't just beads, they're commitment beads.
The sun grows higher, and the pigments glow in its light. People gather, admiring one another's decorations. A man carefully paints lines on a woman's cheeks with a brush of chewed twig, his hand steady, his face focused. It's intimate, almost like holding someone's face while tucking their hair behind an ear. She closes her eyes, letting him paint, then opens them with a smile that feels timeless. You realize these colors aren't random, they're language. In a world without writing, pigment speaks. A red streak might mean power, a necklace of shells might mean devotion. Or maybe they mean nothing more complicated than, I wanted to look good for you today. Either way, the message is clear. Attraction needs symbols, and humans have always found ways to wear them. Later, the feather-haired girl appears, her hair newly braided, dusted with ochre so it glows copper in the light. She wears a necklace too, small bones carved smooth, rattling softly when she moves. You see her talking to the polished antler man, tilting her head just so, the beads catching every ray of sunlight. He listens closely, leaning forward as if the beads themselves command his attention.
You think she knows exactly what she's doing.
Fact: pigments and beads often show up in burial sites of women, but also in men's graves, suggesting beauty and ornamentation weren't gender exclusive. Quirky tidbit: some of the oldest beads come from nacreous shells, tiny but durable, still gleaming after tens of thousands of years. Historians still argue whether these beads carried spiritual weight or simply told stories of who loved whom. As evening comes, the camp transforms into a sea of color. Fires reflect off beads, pigments glow against skin, and laughter rises into the dark. You lean back, watching the spectacle, and it dawns on you, these shells and streaks of ochre are humanity's first sparkles, the first attempts to dazzle one another with something unnecessary but beautiful.
And unnecessary beauty, you realize, is the true heart of romance. You press your fingers into the dirt, feeling the coolness. For a moment, you imagine what archaeologists will think tens of thousands of years later, holding these beads in sterile labs, writing scholarly debates about ritual significance. They'll never see the sidelong glances, the flushed cheeks, the shy gifts. But you see them now, alive and real, shimmering in the firelight. The air feels heavier tonight, as if the clouds themselves are leaning close to listen. You notice that the chatter around the fire has taken on a strange, hushed rhythm. People aren't laughing as much. Instead, they sit in small circles, their bodies painted, their beads rattling faintly, and their eyes shining in the torchlight. You realize you're about to witness something far more unusual than beads or dances. This is the realm of fertility magic, rituals involving carved figurines, whispered chants, and the belief that love, life, and birth can be coaxed into being with the right symbols. Near the center of camp, an elder pulls out a bundle wrapped in animal hide. With a slow, deliberate movement, she unwraps it to reveal a small figurine. It's not polished like jewelry or dazzling like feathers. Instead, it's heavy and blunt, carved from stone into the unmistakable form of a woman. Wide hips, large breasts, an exaggerated belly. You've probably seen images of these in museums today, those Venus figurines that archaeologists argue about endlessly. Fact: figurines like the Venus of Willendorf, dating back around 25,000 years, are among the oldest representations of the human form. Quirky tidbit: some were so tiny they could fit in the palm of a hand, making them pocket-sized fertility charms. Historians still argue whether they symbolized goddesses, pregnant women, or just wishful thinking for abundant love and children. The elder holds the figurine aloft, and the crowd grows quiet. You feel the weight of the moment.
It's not just an object, it's a presence. People lean forward, as if hoping the stone itself will wink, nod, and bless them with good fortune. The elder begins to hum. Others join, low and steady, like the background hum of bees. The rhythm builds, pulsing, as if the figurine is pulling the sound into itself. You notice a couple sitting close to each other. They clasp hands, their fingers trembling. When the elder passes the figurine around, it lands in their palms. They cradle it gently, pressing it against their foreheads before handing it back. You can almost hear their silent plea, "May we be chosen, may we be fruitful, may our bond bring life." Fact: some scholars think figurines like these were used during rituals specifically designed for couples hoping to conceive. Quirky tidbit: in certain digs, figurines were found deliberately broken, as if shattering them released some hidden energy. Historians still argue whether breaking them was destructive anger or hopeful renewal. As the figurine travels around the circle, people whisper into the air. Not prayers as you'd recognize them today, more like half-sung sounds, fragments of words, sighs that rise and vanish like smoke.
You catch snippets, strung bones, milk for the child, safe birth. The wishes feel practical and deeply human. After all, in a world where life is fragile, fertility isn't just personal, it's survival for the group. The hum grows louder, and soon bodies start to sway. Someone tosses herbs onto the fire, and sparks leap upward. The smoke curls strangely, painting shapes in the air. A young man stands, holding a carved bone object shaped vaguely like a phallus. He waves it in rhythm with the chanting, an act both comical and deadly serious. You bite back a laugh. It looks like someone just brought a Stone Age party prop, but no one else is laughing. The others gaze at it as if it carries divine significance. Fact: archaeologists have unearthed carved objects that many believe were ritual phallic symbols, though no one can say with certainty. Quirky tidbit: one 28,000-year-old example found in Germany was almost a foot long, polished smooth, and probably had multiple uses: tool, weapon, and symbol all in one. Historians still argue whether these were fertility icons or just very practical multi-purpose sticks. The fire spits, and the chants climb higher. Couples lean together, some pressing their foreheads, others brushing shoulders. You realize this ritual is as much about public acknowledgement as it is about private hope. It's not enough to feel desire. Here, you display it before the community, binding love to survival, weaving it into the fabric of group life. A woman begins to dance slowly, her belly painted with a spiral of red ochre. The pattern glows in the firelight, each twist catching your eye. She sways gently, her movements less about seduction and more about embodying the cycle of life itself. Others join, marking spirals onto their own skin with ash or ochre, until the entire circle feels like a living mural of fertility symbols. Fact: spiral patterns appear repeatedly in prehistoric art, often linked to cycles, birth, or the turning of seasons. Quirky tidbit: some caves contain wall carvings of pregnant figures surrounded by spirals, possibly fertility shrines. Historians still argue whether the spiral meant eternity, water, or simply looked nice when painted on a round belly. You feel yourself slipping into the Reichen, the chants echoing in your chest. It's strange how quickly you accept the logic of this place. Figurines can grant blessings, spirals can summon life, bone carvings can shift destiny. You glance at the faces around the fire, their eyes shining, their bodies swaying, and it hits you that the real power isn't in the objects, it's in the shared belief. Everyone agrees this matters, so it does. At the ritual's climax, the elder raises both figurine and phallic, carving high into the firelight. Sparks leap around them, filling the air with glittering motes. The crowd erupts into a final chorus, a rolling wave of sound that shakes the very ground beneath your feet.
A moment, you half believe that somewhere in the dark sky above, spirits are listening, nodding, deciding the fate of these hopeful couples.
When the chanting fades, the length follows.
People sit breathing heavily, sweat dripping, cheeks streaked with pigment and ash. The figurine is wrapped carefully and set aside again. Couples drift closer together, leaning shoulder to shoulder, comforted by the sense that the universe, or at least their community, has heard them.
You lean back, staring into the embers, and think about what you've just seen.
Love here isn't just about glances and gifts. It's tied to the terrifying, miraculous process of bringing new life into a brutal world. Romance is fused with survival, hope with ritual, desire with community. Historians still argue whether these rituals were religion, medicine, or theater. You shrug inwardly. Whatever the labels, you've just witnessed humanity's earliest attempt to bend the chaos of life into meaning, and you know one thing for certain: when people care this much, even a lump of carved stone feels alive. Morning mist curls low across the valley, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and wildflowers just beginning to open. You follow a small group heading toward a clearing where the trees part in a natural circle. The space feels deliberate, as if nature herself built it for gatherings. Here the tone is lighter, less solemn than last night's fertility chants.
This isn't about survival so much as spectacle. You're about to witness courtship parades, moments when individuals step forward, paint themselves like living canvases, and strut in displays of exaggerated flair.
The crowd assembles quickly. People paint their bodies in ochre stripes, smear charcoal across their cheeks, and adorn themselves with feathers, shells, and bones. The parade begins with a thump, someone beating a hollow log with a stick, a drum echoing through the trees. Then, one by one, figures step into the center, showing off their artistry. Fact: evidence from prehistoric sites suggests people used pigments, feathers, and ornaments not only in rituals but also for display. Quirky tidbit: one site in Spain revealed eagle talons fashioned into pendants, hinting at flair for the dramatic. Historians still argue whether these decorations were religious symbols, clan markers, or simply Stone Age fashion statements. The first contestant emerges. He's painted his chest with zigzag stripes of red ochre, his hair stiffened with animal fat so it spikes outward. Around his neck, a string of teeth rattles loudly with every step. He stomps forward, puffing out his chest and flexing in time with the drum.
You can't help but chuckle. It's like a prehistoric bodybuilding competition, complete with an audience trying not to laugh too openly.
Then comes a woman draped in feathers, her arms spread like wings. She hops lightly, twisting her body to mimic a bird's dance. Feathers float down with each movement, and children in the crowd scramble to catch them. The woman twirls, her bead necklace clattering like a song of its own. A boy near you whispers, "She's like a spirit bird," before turning red when he realizes he said it too loudly.
Fact: some anthropologists think these parades were influenced by animal courtship rituals, mimicking birds' plumage or deer's displays.
Quirky tidbit: in certain digs, perforated bird bones appear, possibly worn as whistles to add sound to the show. Historians still argue whether people borrowed from animals out of reverence, imitation, or sheer entertainment.
The third performer is older, perhaps 40 winters, but he's not about to be outshined. He steps forward, painted entirely in ash, his skin ghostly gray. With a sudden roar, he leaps into a crouch, slapping the ground with both hands. Dust bursts upward, covering him in a cloud. When it clears, he's crouched like a predator, glaring with wild eyes. The crowd gasps, then erupts into cheers. You grin. He may be older, but he's mastered the art of drama. As the parade continues, you notice a rhythm. Each performer tries to outdo the last. Brighter pigments, wilder moves, louder noises. One man wears a crown of branches decorated with berries that tumble out mid-dance, leaving a trail behind him. Another woman balances a hollow gourd filled with stones on her head, shaking it so it rattles with every step, a primitive maraca that turns heads immediately. Fact: archaeologists have found decorated gourds and rattles among early artifacts, hinting at their role in ceremonies.
Quirky tidbit: some rattles were shaped like animals, suggesting a playful element. Historians still argue whether they were toys, instruments, or ritual props.
The real show, though, isn't just the display, it's the watching.
Couples in the crowd lean closer, whispering, giggling, sharing glances. Each performance is both entertainment and audition. If you step into the circle, you're saying, "Notice me." If someone smiles back, you know you've succeeded. The parade is less about perfection and more about courage, the bravery to step forward, risk embarrassment, and show what makes you unique. At one point, a young man painted in stripes attempts a backflip. For a second, it looks like he'll land it. Then, splat. He collapses in the dust, covered in his own ochre. The crowd roars with laughter, and though his pride is bruised, he bows dramatically, grinning as if the fall were intentional. You realize confidence counts more than grace. Fact: displays like these may have served as evolutionary signals: strength, agility, creativity. Quirky tidbit: one researcher joked that Stone Age parades were the first talent shows. Historians still argue whether success in these events actually increased one's chances of partnership or simply boosted social standing.
As the sun dips lower, the finale begins.
All the participants step into the circle together, painted, feathered, rattling, stomping in rhythm. It's chaotic, a blur of color and noise like a living kaleidoscope. Dust fills the air, feathers whirl, beads clatter. The crowd claps along, stomping feet until the ground itself seems to hum. In the midst of it, you catch sight of two dancers breaking formation. They lock eyes, spinning closer, their movements synchronizing naturally. The crowd notices, cheers rising, but the pair seems oblivious, lost in their own orbit. It's subtle but unmistakable. The parade has done its job. When the drumming ends, the dancers collapse in laughter, panting, sweat streaking their pigments. The crowd claps, whistles through hollow bones, and slowly disperses. You sit, still buzzing from the spectacle, thinking about how much effort humans pour into showing off, whether with feathers, paint, or awkward flips in the dust. Historians still argue whether prehistoric parades were rituals, performances, or mating displays. But watching the way glances linger, the way laughter flows, the way two people walk off together into the twilight, you're convinced of one thing. No matter how ancient the time, love has always needed a stage. Night falls again, and the valley takes on a silvery shine beneath the glow of the moon. Shadows stretch long between the trees, and the hush of the evening feels charged with expectation. Tonight, you realize the mood has shifted once more. This isn't a parade or a fertility rite.
This is something stranger, softer, almost theatrical.
You're about to step into the world of moonlit masquerades where faces are hidden, voices change, and identity itself becomes a tool of romance.
The gathering begins slowly.
People emerge from their shelters, but not as themselves. Each wears some form of disguise, masks carved from bark, others stitched from hide, some nothing more than mud smeared thick across their features. One figure's mask is decorated with spirals of charcoal, another with crude feathers poking out like crooked quills. A third has painted a grotesque smile that stretches across his entire face.
The affect is eerie and playful all at once.
Fact: archaeologists have found ancient masks dating back at least 9,000 years, some carved from stone, others from organic materials now long decayed. Quirky tidbit: in caves in France and Italy, masks painted onto walls suggest people once performed rituals in disguise. Historians still argue whether masks were used for hunting, shamanism, or early forms of theater. You find yourself surrounded by whispers. With their identities obscured, people move differently, bolder, freer. One masked figure leans close to another and speaks in a high, exaggerated voice.
The outer laus, unsure, was beneath the disguise.
You realize this is part of the ritual, the freedom to flirt without the weight of recognition. For one night, anyone could be anyone, and every interaction comes tinged with mystery. A group forms a circle, masks bobbing in the firelight. They begin to sway, humming low, the sound eerie under the moon. One person leaps into the center, spinning, their mask a crude animal face with tusks. They stomp and growl, sending children squealing in delight. Another joins, wearing a mask shaped like a bird's head, flapping their arms dramatically.
The crowd claps and howls, the masquerade morphing into a playful contest of improvisation.
Fact: many anthropologists believe masks allowed people to channel spirits or animals, bridging the line between human and supernatural. Quirky tidbit: some cultures even used masks for courtship games where partners guessed identities by voice or movement. Historians still argue whether such games were sacred ceremonies or just ancient costume parties.
As the fire crackles, a new game begins. Couples pair off, but they must keep their masks on, speaking only in whispers or strange voices. The challenge is simple: to guess who's who.
You watch one figure stumble through guesses, pointing at the wrong people, while another laughs so hard her mask slips, revealing her grin. When she quickly pulls it back down, you can tell the point isn't just secrecy, it's the thrill of the reveal. A masked man approaches you, his disguise painted with wild zigzags. He bows dramatically, then extends a hand smeared in ochre. You hesitate, then place your hand in his. He twirls you clumsily, nearly tripping over his own feet, but his exaggerated movements send ripples of laughter through the crowd. You realize that behind the silliness lies something more profound. Masks let people test affection in a safe, playful way. If things go wrong, blame the mask, not the person. Fact: some scholars suggest masquerades helped young people practice social roles, learning humor, grace, or courage in low-risk environment. Quirky tidbit: in some modern tribes with ancient traditions, masked dances still include courtship elements, with partners discovering each other mid-ritual.
Historians still argue whether this was rehearsal for adulthood or an essential rite of love. As the night deepens, the Masquerade grows wilder.
A masked figure leaps onto a log, howling at the moon. Others join, clapping and stomping until the forest echoes.
The moonlight turns every mask into a shimmering, uncanny face.
You can't help but feel you're at the first masquerade ball in human history, minus chandeliers, plus a lot more mud.
Suddenly the right man slows. A hush falls.
One masked figure steps into the center, holding a torch. They lift their masks slowly, revealing their face to the crowd. Gasps ripple. Then another removes theirs, then another.
The air grows electric.
You realize the unmasking is the climax of the ritual, the moment when mystery turns into intimacy. One by one, people expose their faces, and with each reveal, laughter, relief, or blushing silence follows. In the firelight, you catch sight of two figures who revealed themselves only to each other. Their masks lie discarded on the ground, and their foreheads touch as they murmur quietly. The masquerade gave them the excuse they needed to close the distance, to turn play into something more real. Fact: rituals involving masks often ended with a reveal, symbolizing transformation or return to identity. Quirky tidbit: in some cultures, removing a mask was considered a powerful gesture of trust. Historians still argue whether unmasking in prehistoric rituals carried the same weight or if it was simply the finale of a party. As the last masks come off, the energy shifts again. People lounge by the fire, laughing about mistaken identities, replaying the funniest impressions, retelling their best guesses. But here and there you notice pairs slipping into the shadows, their conversation sparked not by boldness but by the strange freedom anonymity granted them. You lie back on the grass, the scent of smoke clinging to your hair, the laughter echoing around you. Above, the moon stares down like an unblinking eye, illuminating the discarded masks scattered across the clearing. You think about how something as simple as hiding your face can change everything, how it can turn shyness into courage, awkwardness into humor, strangers into companions. Historians still argue whether these masquerades were sacred invocations or light-hearted social games. But as you drift into the rhythm of the crackling fire, you suspect it was both. After all, what is love if not a kind of mask we try on until someone sees through it? The next day begins with the smell of roasting meat wafting through the camp. Smoke curls upward, mingling with the crisp air, and your stomach growls at the thought of what's cooking. You wander toward the gathering spot and realize today's ritual is far more delicious than dramatic. Forget feathers, forget masks. This is about roasted roots, grilled meat, and sweet berries offered as gifts of love. Tonight you're stepping into the world of prehistoric feasting and flirtation, where the way to someone's heart is quite literally through their stomach. A group of hunters has returned, dragging with them a freshly killed deer. Its body is laid out ceremoniously, and the entire camp cheers. This isn't just dinner, it's an opportunity. Whoever provides food provides status, and status is magnetic. You see one hunter puffing out his chest as he sharpens his flint knife, glancing sidelong to see who's watching. Spoiler, everyone's watching, especially the young women giggling as they whisper behind their hands. Fact: evidence from prehistoric sites shows communal feasting played a huge role in bonding, both socially and romantically. Quirky tidbit: some archaeologists believe mammoth feasts could involve hundreds of people, essentially Stone Age banquets. Historians still argue whether these were planned courtship events or simply practical survival parties. The preparation is just as important as the eating. Women gather roots and tubers, scraping them clean and tossing them into the fire's embers. Someone crushes berries with a flat stone, mixing them with honey found in a hollow tree. A young man carefully spears chunks of deer meat onto sticks, holding them just so over the flames. The smoke makes your eyes water, but the scent, rich, savory, primal, makes you forget about the sting. As the feast builds, small gestures carry hidden meanings. One woman tosses a roasted root toward a man across the fire. He catches it, grins, and takes a bite, never breaking eye contact. Another ladle of berry mash is deliberately dripped onto someone's fingers, giving the excuse to lean in and lick it off playfully. You think about how modern couples feed each other cake at weddings and realize it's just an echo of this ancient game. Fact: sharing food has long been associated with intimacy. Quirky tidbit: in some surviving hunter-gatherer societies, offering the best bite of meat is considered an unspoken romantic gesture. Historians still argue whether prehistoric couples developed similar traditions or if we're projecting our own cultural habits onto them. As the sun dips low, the feast begins in earnest. Firelight flickers across faces as hands reach for meat and roots, bowls of mash, and honey dripping from sticks. You hear laughter erupt as someone bites into a root still hot from the coals, spitting it out dramatically while their partner teases them. You can almost sense the invisible threads of connection weaving tighter with every shared bite, every playful shove, every clink of shells against teeth. The hunters, of course, strut like celebrities. One steps forward, carving off the choicest slice of meat. He carries it slowly, deliberately, and presents it to a woman sitting nearby. The coat murmurs approvingly. She accepts, raises it to her lips, and bites delicately before passing it back to him. The symbolism couldn't be clearer. He provides, she accepts. Together they complete the circle. Fact: animal bones found at certain sites show evidence of selective carving and presentation, suggesting prized cuts were reserved for special occasions. Quirky tidbit: in some digs, archaeologists have even found traces of herbs used as seasoning, prehistoric spice racks, if you will. Historians still argue whether these meals were communal celebrations or thinly veiled matchmaking events. Children race around the fire with honey smeared across their faces, while elders sit back, chewing slowly and watching with knowing smiles. The young ones, however, treat the feast like a stage. Every joke is louder, every laugh more exaggerated, every gesture of sharing more deliberate. You realize the meal isn't just about filling bellies, it's about performing generosity, proving worth, and testing chemistry. One young man tries his luck by slipping a piece of roasted meat directly into a woman's hand. Unfortunately, it's too hot, she yelps, tossing it back into his lap. The crowd howls with laughter, and though his cheeks burn brighter than the fire, she leans in and offers him a berry in return. Embarrassment, it seems, isn't a deal breaker, it's an appetizer. Fact, the act of feeding one another shows up in cultures across the globe as a gesture of closeness. Quirky tidbit, some anthropologists argue early humans may have even staged food competitions, like who could roast the juiciest cut. Historians still argue whether these contests were playful games or serious trials of skill. As the fire burns down to glowing embers, the feast shifts gears. Bellies are full, but now the energy turns to storytelling. Hunters recount the chase, embellishing details for dramatic affect.
Listeners lean closer, eyes wide, laukater spilling out etiewe exaggeration.
But you notice something subtle. The stories always circle back to the food. The spear that brought down the deer. The danger faced in the forest. The bravery that ensured everyone eats tonight.
In Evatale, Romance Zimmer Spaniard survival.
You watch as two people slip away from the fire, still clutching a bowl of mashed berries between them. They walk into the shadows, laughing softly, feeding each other spoonfuls as they go. You don't need to follow to know how the night will end.
The camp settles slowly, people sprawled on hides, satisfied and drowsy. You lick your own fingers, the taste of asha and honey lingering.
It hits you that love in its earliest form might have started right here, in the giving and receiving of food, in the pleasure of eating together, in the unspoken truth that feeding someone is a promise, I'll keep you alive. Historians still argue whether these feasts were pragmatic survival strategies or intentional matchmaking events. But as you lie back beneath the stars, your stomach warm and your heart buzzing, you're certain of one thing: even tens of thousands of years ago, romance already knew how to cook.
The night grows quiet after the feast, but your curiosity keeps you moving.
Beyond the embers, away from the laughter and satisfied sighs, you notice a flicker of light in the distance. Not the casual fire of roasting meat or warming hands, this glow pulses in a circle, strange and deliberate. You step closer, careful not to crunch too loudly on the frosty grass, and soon you realize you've stumbled upon something different entirely.
This isn't just food and flirtation. This is magic.
Tonight, you're about to watch shamans try their hand at prehistoric matchmaking, love spells woven from smoke, chants, and rattling bones. The circle you approach is made of stones, rough yet purposefully placed.
Inside a shaman's ways.
He, or maybe she, gender is hard to pin down in the dim firelight, wears a mantle of feathers and fur, a crown of antlers clattering slightly when the head moves. Bones strung on a cord jangle with each motion like a rattlesnake that somehow keeps rhythm. The crowd here is smaller, hushed, tense with anticipation. These aren't the rowdy eaters from before.
These are seekers, people hoping magic might bend someone else's heart, or at least make theirs stop aching.
Fact, many hunter-gatherer cultures employed shamans to act as intermediaries between the human and spirit world, guiding rituals for health, weather, and love. Quirky tidbit, some early evidence suggests powdered beetle shells or crushed herbs were burned as love charms. Historians still argue whether prehistoric shamans truly aimed to manipulate romance, or if later societies retroactively painted them as love doctors.
You kneel in the shadows as the shaman begins. The voice rises in a low chant, half growl, half lullaby, words you don't understand but feel in your bones. A good rattle shakes like Deidern rein.
Sparks leap upward, making the air taste metallic. Around the circle, participants clutch tokens: a shell from a river, a strand of animal sinew, a smooth pebble rubbed by countless thumbs. Each token, you realize, represents a wish, a plea: notice me, choose me, return to me. One young woman steps forward, offering a sliver of red ochre on a palm. The shaman takes it, grinds it between stone fingers, and smears the powder across her forehead. The crowd gasps. Red, after all, is the color of blood, fire, and, depending who you ask, passion. The woman bows and retreats, her cheeks glowing even without the paint. Somewhere in the darkness you hear muffled laughter. Maybe her crush has noticed. Or maybe he's just nervous he's next. Fact: ochre has been found in burials dating back over 40,000 years, often interpreted as symbolic of life, death, or fertility. Quirky tidbits: some archaeologists argue ochre might have doubled as prehistoric body paint for courting displays. Historians still argue whether such paint was purely symbolic or carried ritual magic. The next petitioner is a young man. He kneels before the shaman, presenting a string of small shells carefully threaded together. The shaman inspects it, nods, and then does something unexpected: tosses the shells into the fire. They crackle and pop, releasing a faint salt smell. The man winces, but the shaman declares in a booming chant that the shell spirit will carry his desire to the wind. Somewhere nearby, a girl shifts uncomfortably, pretending she isn't watching him. Smooth move, buddy. You just sacrificed your entire jewelry stash. The shaman doesn't just accept offerings, they craft spells. A pouch of dried herbs is tossed onto the flames, sending up a bitter smoke that makes your eyes water.
The shanshans rechmalstano, like footsteps chasing something. People sway in unison. The ratless groluda bounce clicking like Tate.
You feel your chest vibrate as though the sound itself is tugging at your ribs. If you weren't already tired, this would be the part that hypnotizes you. Fact: sound and rhythm are central to shamanic rituals across cultures, used to induce trance states. Quirky tidbit: some researchers believe bone rattles were chosen not just for sound but because they contained the life essence of the animal. Historians still argue whether such rituals had practical effects or simply created powerful psychological experiences. One ritual gets particularly strange. The shaman picks up two figurines carved from wood, roughly human-shaped but exaggerated in form. With a sly smile, the shaman presses the two figures together, then pulls them apart, repeating the motion in rhythm with the chant. The crowd chuckles, some covering their mouths, others nudging each other knowingly. The figurines are doused in smoke, tapped against the earth, and then tucked under a hide blanket as though married for the night. You can't help but grin. It's prehistoric puppetry, a ritual rom-com in miniature.
Another participant brings something unusual, our bird's feet are long and sleek.
The shaman lifts it high, then tickles the air above the person's head, brushing the feather across their shoulders. The gesture feels both intimate and theatrical. The feather is finally placed in the fire, and the shaman whispers a blessing. The petitioner's face shines with relief, struck by the fact that even back then, symbols of flight carried connotations of freedom, longing, and messages carried far away. Fact: feathers have been found in prehistoric burial sites, possibly as decoration or ritual items. Quirky tidbit: some tribes in later history believed bird feathers could carry prayers to the sky. Historians still argue whether early humans attached such symbolic meanings or simply liked shiny objects. As the ritual progresses, the atmosphere shifts. What started as solemn grows lighter, more playful. People laugh nervously, teasing each other as they step forward with their offerings. A man jokes that he's running out of bones to give away, while a woman smirks and says maybe that's a good thing, he should settle on one person already. The group bursts into giggles. Even the shaman cracks a grin, proving that magic doesn't always have to be serious. Sometimes it's theater, bonding, and a little community matchmaking. You realize that in this moment, love spells aren't about bending wills. They're about creating a shared space where desire is acknowledged, teased, and woven into community life. If nothing else, the ritual makes it clear who's interested in whom, and sometimes that's enough to spark something real. After all, isn't that still how dating apps work? Just rituals with swipes instead of feathers?
The fire dies down, leaving only glowing embers and a faint smoke that clings to your hair. The shaman's voice fades into a whisper. 10 zilings. People gather their cloaks, clutching their tokens, some burned to ash, others blessed with a chant. Couples drift ever into the shadows, giggling softly. Some leave alone, but with lighter hearts, comforted by the sense that at least they tried, that spirits have heard them. You stay behind a moment longer, gazing at the stone circle. Bones, feathers, ochre, shells, all the odd ingredients of love laid out like a recipe no one can quite follow. Historians still argue whether such rituals actually worked. But watching the smiles, the blushes, the little sparks in people's eyes, you can't help but think they did. Because magic, you realize, isn't always about the supernatural. Sometimes it's about giving people permission to hope. And hope in the right hands can be the strongest love spell of all. The night deepens, stars scattered across the sky like bits of crushed quartz. You think you've seen it all, hunters showing off, shamans muttering charms, feasts of meat and honey. But now you hear a different kind of sound, soft at first, then rising in a rhythm that feels both playful and eerie. Drums again, yes, but layered with the scrape of bone flutes and the sudden bark of voices. As you wander closer, you realize this is not another face or spellcasting. This is theater. This is masquerade. Tonight, you're about to step into a world where animal masks and wild dancing turn into flirtation, mystery, and more than a little bit of chaos. The fire you approach is brighter than usual, fed by thick logs and resin that make the flames leap unnaturally high. Around the blaze stand figures you almost mistake for beasts. One wears the head of a stag, complete with antlers that scrape the smoky air. Another crouches beneath a bear's skull, fur draped down their back, claws sewn onto their hands. There's a bird too, its beak carved from wood, its feathers dyed in ochre reds and blacks. For a second you honestly wonder if the forest itself has come to life. Then one of the animals stumbles, nearly tripping on a log, and the illusion breaks. Just people, pretending to be something more. Fact, archaeologists have uncovered masks made from animal skulls and bones at prehistoric sites, suggesting ceremonial use. Quirky tidbit, some masks even show evidence of paint as though decorated for flair. Historians still argue whether these masks were for religious rituals, hunting magic, or playful masquerades like this one. The dancers circle the fire, stomping and swaying. Each mask exaggerates its role. The stag bows gracefully, antlers glinting in the light. The bear lumbers, arms swinging in mock ferocity. The bird hops and flutters, wings spread wide. The crowd cheers, claps and whistles. But it's not just entertainment. You notice how the dancers angle towards certain spectators, bowing low or prancing close, letting the mystery of the mask become an excuse to flirt. Was behint der Antlers? Who hides Benny at the feet has? Mystery is half the fun. Fact, anthropologists note that anonymity in ritual often allows participants to act freely without fear of judgment. Quirky tidbit, some researchers think masked rituals were one of the earliest versions of carnivals, communal events where rules were temporarily bent. Historians still argue whether prehistoric masquerades encouraged romantic pairings or simply reinforced social unity. One masked dancer, the bird flutters toward a group of young women, tapping the ground rhythmically with carved talons. Laughter erupts. One woman steps forward, mimicking the movement, her arms spread like wings. The bird tilts its head and hops closer until the two are circling each other, feather to imaginary feather. The crowd claps along, and suddenly what seemed like ritual now looks like a prehistoric version of speed dating, complete with dance-offs. The stag takes a different approach, bowing low before a young man on the outer side of the fire. The man, cheeks flushed, bows back awkwardly. The crowd bursts into laughter, egging him on. The stag lifts his masked head and nudges him playfully. In another time, in another place, this might be scandalous. Here, it's part of the performance.
fact, many cultures have used masked dances as a way of breaking social barriers. Quirky tidbit: some masks were so heavy that dancers risked injury if they stumbled. Historians still argue whether prehistoric masks were practical tools or deliberately theatrical contraptions meant to awe. As the Feuerspitz sparks into the night, the performance grows wilder. Drums pound faster, voice rise louder. The bear roars, well, a pretty decent human impression of a roar, and charges the edge of the crowd. People shriek and scatter, only to collapse in giggles once the danger passes. Someone tosses a roasted root toward the beast, who promptly gobbles it up in exaggerated chomps. The laughter doubles. And yet, beneath the humor, there's tension. Every move is charged with energy, every glance from behind a mask is sharpened by mystery. You watch as two masked figures, the stag and the bird, break from the circle. They dance together, weaving around the fire in tight spirals, their movements growing closer until the feathers brush against antlers. The crowd hushes, then bursts into cheers. Are these two simply performers, or has something more personal sparked behind the disguises? You'll never know for sure, and maybe that's the point. Fact: symbolic courtship dances exist in cultures across the globe, often involving mimicry of animals. Quirky tidbit: bone flutes dating back 40,000 years could play surprisingly complex melodies, possibly accompanying such performances. Historians still argue whether music in these rituals was sacred, romantic, or simply fun. The masks, though eerie, seem to serve another purpose. They let people become someone else, just for a night. A shy girl behind a wolf mask suddenly howls boldly, making the crowd roar with approval. A quiet boy under a boar's snout charges his friends, scattering them in chaos. Freed from their ordinary roles, they get to experiment with new sides of themselves, brave, funny, bold, mysterious. And in that experimentation, bonds form. Love often hides in the shadows of play. The masks, though eerie, seem to serve another purpose. They let people become someone else, just for a night. A shy girl behind a wolf mask suddenly howls boldly, making the crowd roar with approval. A quiet boy under a boar's snout charges his friends, scattering them in chaos. Freed from their ordinary roles, they get to experiment with new sides of themselves, brave, funny, bold, mysterious. And in that experimentation, bonds form. Love often hides in the shadows of play. The fire crackles low, yet the dancing doesn't stop. Some masks are tossed aside, revealing flushed faces, tangled hair, and wide smiles. Others keep their disguises on, letting the night remain suspended in mystery. Couples break away from the circle, slipping into the dark edges of the camp, laughter trailing behind them. Perhaps tomorrow they'll deny anything happened. Tonight, the masks give them permission to pretend, to flirt, to experiment with connection. Fact: rituals that blur human and animal identities are thought to reflect early beliefs in transformation and liminality. Quirky tidbit: some evidence suggests paint was reapplied during performances to refresh the power of the mask. Historians still argue whether participants believed in literal transformation or enjoyed symbolic play. By the time the fire dwindles to embers, the performers are exhausted, collapsing onto hides, masks slipping off like fallen helmets after battle. You can't help but smile at the sight of antlers askew, fur matted with sweat, feathers half singed by sparks. The illusion fades, but the memory lingers. You realize that what you've just witnessed is as much about community as it is about love. Masks let people try on new identities, test new dynamics, and maybe discover something they didn't know they wanted. As you finally curl into your own corner, the faint smell of smoke clinging to your clothes, you think back to the wolf's howl, the bird's flutter, the stag's bow. Historians still argue whether these masquerades were sacred or playful. But as sleep creeps in, you can't help but feel that they were both, and that sometimes the line between divine ritual and a prehistoric crush is as thin as a carved wooden mask. The masks are tucked away now, feathers smoldering quietly by the fire pit, antlers leaned against a tree like trophies forgotten after a long festival. The camp settlers into a softer home, no more roaring bear impressions or frontage drumbeats. You wander past the sleeping hats and still warm embers, drowned by the cool clarity of the night sky. Overhead, the stars blaze in impossible numbers, as though someone spilled powdered bone across the heavens. Tonight, you realize, is not about food or masks or bones rattled in smoke.
Tonicht, the stage belongs to the sky itself.
This is the theater of stars, where prehistoric love rituals find their backdrop in constellations and whispered promises beneath endless darkness. You stretch out on your back, the earth cold but oddly grounding. Beside you, figures also lie sprawled, young hunters, painted women, children who should be asleep but peek upward wide-eyed. The Milky Way arcs across the sky like a glowing river. The air feels almost reverent, as though the night itself demands attention. And into this canvas of silence, soft conversations begin.
Not about hunting, not about gathering, but about stories.
Fact, early humans almost certainly used the stars to navigate and to mark the passing of seasons. Quirky tidbit, some of the oldest carvings found on mammoth tusks and bones appear to represent constellations. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people treated the stars as maps, deities, or companions in nightly storytelling. A boy points at a cluster of bright dots and whispers, "That's the mammoth." His voice carries just enough confidence to convince the girl beside him, who nods solemnly as if she's known all along. Another young woman gestures at 3 stars in a line, claiming it's the path of a hero chasing his beloved across the heavens. The stories flow effortlessly, part myth, part flirtation.
Every tale is half true, half fantasy, but entirely enchanting under the glow of starlight.
You notice that lying beneath the stars creates intimacy of its own. The darkness shields blushes, the whispers seem amplified, in every small gesture, a hand brushing against another, a sigh carried by the breeze, feels monumental.
You can almost have a collective heartbeat of the camp, pulsing in time with the silence between stars.
Fact, many ancient cultures later embedded courtship themes into star myths, suggesting the practice might have deep roots. Quirky tidbit, in some cases, prehistoric carvings show pairs of animals or humans alongside star patterns, as though linking romance with the sky. Historians still argue whether these symbols were literal representations of lovers or symbolic of fertility cycles. A young man tilts his head toward the brightest star, saying it's the eye of a giant beast watching over the camp. His companion laughs and insists it's actually the torch of a lover searching for his lost partner. They bicker softly, playfully, each story more elaborate than the last. The group around them chuckles, clearly entertained. And yet, beneath the jokes you sense something more, an unspoken agreement that the stars are safe ground for talking about love without naming names. One couple drifts a little farther from the group, their silhouettes barely visible against the glow of the horizon. The boy points to a faint streak across the sky, a meteor's ghost trail.
The girl gasps, then whispers something you can't catch.
He leans in, the heads nearly touching as they trace shapes together. You smile, realizing that even tens of thousands of years ago, shooting stars carried the same wish-making power they do now. Fact, meteors and comets appear in myths across the globe, often interpreted as omens or messages. Quirky tidbit, some researchers believe ancient people deliberately camped at high elevations for clearer views of the sky. Historians still argue whether these night vigils were practical stargazing for navigation or romantic gatherings in disguise. The night grows colder, but no one seems eager to leave. The fire has died, Yet the stars offer their own warmth, the warmth of stories shared, of futures imagined, of companionship under a ceiling too vast to ever feel alone.
You notice how many tales revolve around pursuit. Hunters chasing beasts, heroes chasing lovers, gods chasing mortals across the heavens. Desire, it seems, is stitched into the very fabric of the cosmos. A girl traces her finger along the line of stars forming a crooked vow and declares it's the bird of spring.
She says when the bird returns, love will bloom, food will be plentiful, and babies will be born. The older women nearby nod knowingly. Fertility, romance, survival, it all blends seamlessly in their stories, wrapped up in the seasonal rhythm of the stars. Fact: alignments of ancient monuments like Stonehenge and Nabta Playa suggest early humans tracked solstices and equinoxes through star positions. Quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest lovers may have planned meetings based on star cycles, using celestial calendars as secret rendezvous codes.
Historians still argue whether prehistoric people consciously scheduled romance by the heavens.
The crowd thins slowly, some returning to their hides, others curling close for warmth beneath shared cloaks. The few who remain grow quieter, their voices trailing into drowsy murmurs.
You linger, entranced by the silence that follows.
Above you, constellations march on in their endless patterns. You realize that the stars gave prehistoric people more than navigation and timekeeping, they gave them a backdrop for love. A reason to lie side by side, to share whispers, to dream aloud. As your eyes grow heavy, you recall the painted walls you saw earlier, full of animals, symbols, and patterns. You wonder, were some of those marks actually maps of the sky? Was that bison-shaped constellation once drawn to impress a lover? Historians still argue whether the earliest art was cosmic storytelling, practical charting, or romantic doodles.
But as the night sky swallows you whole, you're convinced it was all three. The camp sleeps now, wrapped in the soft blanket of starlight.
Lovers drift in and out of dreams, their whispers fading into snores. Children curl up beside parents, their eyes still full of cosmic beasts and lovers chasing across the heavens.
You close your own eyes, letting the stars linger behind your eyelids like a fairy makes.
Tomorrow the sun will rise and the hand will resume.
But tonight, under this infinite ceiling, love has already found its place in the cosmos. By the time dawn creeps across the horizon, the camp stirs to life again.
You hear the sound of water lapping nearby, steady and insistent, reminding you that this world is not only forests and plains but also rivers and seas. Today, love is not performed in the glow of firelight or beneath the stars, it's carried on the water. You follow a small group as they prepare for something extraordinary, crossing to the far side of the waves to fetch treasures that speak louder than words. Tonight, romance means risky voyages and exotic gifts, shells, stones, and the bragging rights that come with surviving the journey. At the edge of a wide river or perhaps a coastal inlet, you watch as men and women push crude rafts into the water. Bundles of reeds tied together, logs lashed with sinew, animal hides stretched across wooden frames, they look fragile, barely afloat. Yet the people treat them with reverence, like prized tools. For many, this may be their first crossing. For others, just another chance to impress.
After all, what says pick me more than rowing into danger just to bring back something shiny?
Fact: archaeological evidence shows that even tens of thousands of years ago, humans were capable of sea travel, moving between islands in the Mediterranean and reaching Australia. Quirky tidbit: some of the oldest beads made from seashells have been found far inland, proving they were carried across long distances. Historians still argue whether these voyages were purely about survival trade, or if some were fueled by romantic gifting rituals. The preparations are half practical, half theatrical. Hunters strap weapons to their sides, but you notice they also tie charms to their rafts, feathers, beads, carved bones. Protection or just flair?
Hat to sei.
Young men grin as they flex their shoulders, clearly aware of the eyes watching from the shore. A group of girls lean together, whispering and laughing, already speculating about who will return with the most impressive treasures. You can almost hear them ranking the suitors before the boats even leave. The launch itself feels ceremonial. The crowd gathers at the shoreline, clapping and calling out encouragement. A mother throws a handful of herbs into the waves for luck. A father shouts instructions, pretending not to choke up as his son paddles away. Children shriek with delight, running along the shore until the boats drift too far. You stand ankle-deep in water, watching the rafts bob and sway, their paddlers shrinking against the horizon. Fact: water has always been a liminal space in human imagination, a boundary between worlds, both dangerous and sacred. Quirky tidbit: in some ancient cultures, crossing water was considered proof of bravery, a desirable trait for a mate. Historians still argue whether these crossings were intentionally used as love tests or simply survival necessities romanticized later.
Hours pass. The shore crowd grows restless.
Some nap under hides, others gather reeds or fish while they wait. But everyone's eyes keep straying back to the horizon. When the first raft returns, cheers erupt. The paddlers are soaked, exhausted, yet triumphant. One man lifts a net bulging with seashells, their smooth curves shimmering in the sunlight. The crowd gasps as though he's returned with pure gold. He stumbles ashore, immediately seeking the gaze of a certain young woman. Without hesitation, he presses a shell into her palm. She blushes, turning it over in the light, and the onlookers murmur approvingly. Courtship, it seems, is as much about spectacle as sincerity. Fact: seashell jewelry has been discovered in sites over 100,000 years old, some transported hundreds of miles from their coastal origins. Quirky tidbit: one particular kind of shell, the cowrie, was used for centuries as currency and a symbol of fertility. Historians still argue whether prehistoric shell gifts were symbolic of wealth, love, or both. More rafts arrive, each bearing its own prizes: obsidian shards, smooth driftwood, stones shaped like hearts by the tide. The givers know how to play it up, kneeling dramatically, presenting their finds like treasure chests. The recipients laugh, cry, or occasionally turn their heads away in refusal, to the collective gasp of the audience. Rejection stings, but at least you get to keep the shell.
The rituals vary.
One boy tosses shells into the air, letting them rain down like confetti, while a girl shrieks in delight. Another carefully strings his find into a necklace before placing it around his beloved's neck. One daring soul even bites a shell in half with his teeth before offering the remaining piece, as if to say, "I'll share everything, even this." You roll your eyes, but admit it's kind of sweet. Fact: symbolic splitting of objects as tokens of love shows up across time, from broken rings in Rome to half lockets in the Victorian era. Quirky tidbit: some anthropologists believe the earliest engagement rings may have been stringed shells or pierced stones. Historians still argue whether these acts were true commitments or just gestures to impress for the night.
Note: either voyage ends well. One raft never returns.
People whisper, eyes fixed on the horizon, until finally the truth settles in: the water took them. Grief ripples through the crowd, a stark reminder that romance was often tied to risk. Yet the survivors honor the lost by stringing their shells together, raising them on poles, declaring the gifts now sacred. You shiver at the thought. Love rituals here are stitched with both triumph and tragedy. As the sun sets, the shoreline transforms into a marketplace of affection. Couples sit together, trading shells and stones, weaving necklaces, threading bracelets. Children scamper with smaller prizes, mimicking their elders. Elders smile knowingly, as though they've seen the same pattern repeat for generations.
Laughter mingles with the crash of waves, and for a while the whole community hums with the music of exchange.
You realize that these voyages aren't just about gifts. They're about proving something bigger.
Bravery, generosity, endurance.
The willingness to face unknown waters for the chance to bring back beauty. It's romance as performance art, where risk itself becomes part of the gift. You think about modern couples showing off with grand gestures, skydiving proposals, elaborate trips, and realize the instinct is ancient. Fact, long-distance trade networks have existed since prehistory, carrying goods like shells, amber, and obsidian across vast landscapes. Quirky tidbit, archaeologists sometimes find caches of unused shells, suggesting not every gift hit its mark. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were primarily economic or charged with layers of symbolic meaning.
Night falls, and the waves glimmer under the moonlight. Couples walk hand in hand, shells clicking softly as they sway from necks and wrists.
Some linger by the water, tossing stones into the surf, whispering promises that dissolve into the tide. You sit back, letting the ocean's height lull you. It strikes you that romance, like the sea, is vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous, but always irresistible. The last thing you hear before drifting towards sleep is a young woman laughing, her voice carried on the wind. He risked his life for this shell. I guess I should let him sit closer.
The coat chuckles.
Somewhere behind you, an elder mutters that love always makes fools of us. You smile, staring at the moonlit waves, and think maybe being a fool is the point. You wake to the dry crunch of soil beneath your feet, the shoreline fading behind you as the path drifts inland. The sound of waves has been replaced by the low hum of wind against open plains, carrying the faint smell of dust, herbs, and animal musk. The camp ahead feels different from the riverside community you left. Their rituals don't hinge on water crossings or glittering shells. Here, love is declared through persistence, through chases across the land, through dances that mimic the very hunt. In this world, courtship is less about what you bring back from faraway horizons and more about what you can endure, how long you can run, how beautifully you can move. A group of young men gathers in a circle, faces streaked with paint, bodies glistening from exertion. They stamp their feet in unison, a pounding rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Around them, women watch with folded arms, hiding their smiles behind strands of hair. The performers know the audience is everything, so they leap higher, spin faster, and let out whoops that echo across the plain.
This is no casual show, it's survival of the most impressive dancer.
Fact, many hunter-gatherer societies use dance not only for ritual but also for courtship, weaving movements from daily life into symbolic displays. Quirky tidbit, some dances involved animal impersonations, men pretending to be gazelles or ostriches to showcase agility. Historians still argue whether prehistoric love dances were structured events or simply spontaneous performances elevated into tradition. As the dancing continues, a second ritual unfolds nearby. A girl steps forward with a bundle of sticks, tossing them onto the ground like scattered bones. This signals the start of a chase. Her chosen suitor must gather the sticks while sprinting after her across the plain, a game of endurance that has the crowd roaring with anticipation. He laughs, almost tripping over his own excitement, but quickly recovers and races after her, snatching up sticks one by one. She glances over her shoulder, deliberately slowing just enough to keep the chase alive. It's playful, but also serious. His persistence is the proof of devotion. Fact: in some indigenous traditions, running games were tied to courtship, where speed and stamina equaled attractiveness. Quirky tidbit, early European settlers often misinterpreted these games as kids' play, not realizing they were embedded in adult romance rituals. Historians still argue whether prehistoric running games were true love trials or simply competitive sport, later given symbolic weight. The crowd follows the pair, clapping, shouting encouragement, and laughing when the young man stumbles. He doesn't give up though, and when he finally scoops up the last stick and collapses beside her, she offers him a drink of water. It seems small, but the gesture is loud with meaning, a silent yes.
Elsewhere, another dance begins.
This one is slower, hypnotic. Men and women together circle a fire, their feet brushing the earth in perfect rhythm. Each movement echoes a daily act, pounding seeds, weaving nets, tracking animals. It's both story and seduction, showing how well someone fits into the rhythm of life. You catch a boy leaning toward his friend, whispering with a grin, "Watch her, see how she grinds the seed motion? That's life material." The friend snickers, trying not to choke on roasted roots. Fact: evidence from ancient rock art suggests communal dances often illustrated stories of hunting and gathering, blending performance with education. Quirky tidbit: some anthropologists note parallels between these dances and modern club culture, sweat, rhythm, and sideways glances across the circle. Historians still argue whether the prehistoric dance floor was more about spiritual communion or social matchmaking.
The night deepens and the performance grows stronger.
One man dons a mask carved from antelope bone, painted with streaks of red ochre. He bends low, stomping and snorting like the animal he imitates, circling a group of women. They squeal in mock fear, scattering before him. Finally, one steps forward, placing her hand against the mask. The crowd roars approval. It's her playful acceptance, a declaration as public as a wedding vow.
You can't help but grin. It's theater, but theater with consequences.
Fact: ritual masks appear in archaeological finds dating back tens of thousands of years, often linked to fertility or initiation. Quirky tidbit: some early explorers described animal courting dances that involved dressing in furs and bones. Historians still argue whether masks were sacred objects in love rituals or just props to impress. Your attention shifts to the outskirts of the camp, where the quieter test of love is unfolding. A pair walks into the tall grass, carrying nothing but torches. The man hums a tune while the woman answers with a whistle. It's a private duet, a call and response repeated until the fire burns low.
No crowd, no chase, no spectacle.
Just sound woven in the dark, two voices learning whether they can blend. You notice how nearby couples copy them, humming softly as if hoping to find their own harmony. Fact: early music, flutes made of bone, simple whistles, has been discovered in prehistoric sites, suggesting sound was central to ritual life. Quirky tidbit: one of the oldest known instruments, a vulture bone flute, is over 40,000 years old. Historians still argue whether these instruments were primarily for ceremony, entertainment, or courtship. Back at the fire, the dancers collapse, their chests heaving, sweat dripping. The women exchange glances, whispering judgments, sometimes approving, sometimes dismissive. The men sit straighter when noticed, pretending not to care. You realize that here, romance is a public negotiation, a balance between effort and reception, display and choice. It's less about subtle whispers, more about declaring yourself in front of everyone and hoping your rhythm, your run, your endurance catches the right pair of eyes. A child tugs at your hand, eager to show you a game. He tosses a carved stick into the air, catching it clumsily. Laughing, he explains in fragments of gesture and sound, when he grows, he'll toss this stick before a girl, and if she catches it, that's fate. You smile, realizing even the youngest here are already rehearsing the dance of love. Fact: children often participated in mock versions of adult rituals, preparing them for later roles in society. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists sometimes find miniature tools and ornaments in child burials, suggesting play was part of early social learning. Historians still argue whether such objects were toys, training devices, or symbolic offerings.
The fire blazes sich, drums pound louder.
The night pulses with rhythm and laughter, but you feel a softness under it all. These rituals, sweat, chase, dance, song, aren't just about choosing partners. They're about weaving the community together, syncing bodies and voices, turning the chaos of desire into something patterned and shared. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm tempt you like heartbeat, and wonder how much of modern romance is still hidden dance, still half jazz, still theater under different lights. As you drift, the last thing you hear is an elder chuckling to herself, muttering words you barely catch. Love is just another hunt. And no one ever wins without a little sweat. You wake again to the smell of damp earth, the crackle of distant thunder, and the faint hum rising from the forest. The camp has shifted from the open plains to a shadowed woodland where the air feels thicker, charged with something invisible. Tonight's rituals are not about dancing or racing or braving the sea. Here, love is tangled up with the unseen, with spirits that must be pleased before two people can draw closer. It's unsettling at first. You're not just watching humans now, but their attempts to court the approval of the other world. The elders gather in a circle, painting symbols on their bodies with white clay and black ash. Each swirl, each line carries meaning only they can fully read. Younger men and women wait nearby, nervous but excited. This isn't a simple game of chase or gift-giving. This is negotiation with forces they can't see. To woo someone here, you first have to convince the ancestors or the forest spirits or the very thunder overhead that you're worthy.
No pressure, right?
Fact: across many cultures, ancestral blessings were crucial to unions, and rituals often blended romance with spiritual approval. Quirky tidbit: in some groups, couples had to present offerings to the spirits before they were allowed to speak directly to each other. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily spiritual necessities or socially enforced theatrics to slow impulsive matches.
A young man steps forward.
His chest is smeared with ochre, his hair bound with feathers. He kneels before a carved stone set at the center of the circle, pressing a bead into its cracks. This bead, he claims, is meant for a girl watching quietly in the shadows. But he cannot hand it to her, not yet. First, he must call on the spirits. He chants softly, his words rising and falling like wind through branches.
The crowd hushes, listening. Even the girl holds her breath. Suddenly, a drumbeat begins.
Low, relentless. Elders sway, humming deep notes that vibrate through the air. The young man trembles, sweat running down his brow, but he keeps his voice steady. Finally, one elder steps forward, lifting a smoking branch of herbs. He wafts the smoke around the kneeling figure, muttering words that sound like both blessing and test. Then he motions toward the girl.
Only now may the man rise and approach her.
Fact: smoke rituals appear worldwide, symbolizing purification before sacred acts. Quirky tidbit: some prehistoric hearths contain unusual burned plants that researchers believe were chosen for their scent or even mild hallucinogenic properties. Historians still argue whether smoke was purely symbolic or meant to physically alter the senses during rituals.
The girl steps forward, her hands trembling slightly. She touches the bead still warm from his palm. The crowd exhales as one, the tension breaking.
The gift is accepted, but more importantly, the spirit seems satisfied. Or at least no lightning strikes, which counts as a win in your book. Nearby, another couple undergoes their trial. They kneel opposite one another, with an elder between them. In his hand is a small rattle made of bone and seeds. He shakes it slowly, then faster, demanding the couple mirror its rhythm by tapping their chests with their hands. The crowd giggles as the man fumbles, missing the beat, while the woman keeps time perfectly. The elder smirks, clearly enjoying the test. Finally, the man catches up, and their joined rhythm fills the circle. Fact: rhythm and drumming have long been tied to trance states and group bonding. Quirky tidbit: in some traditions, syncing rhythms symbolized compatibility, the literal heartbeat of love. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people intentionally used rhythm as matchmaking or if it was just the byproduct of ritual performance. Farther back you notice another layer of the ritual, offerings tied into trees. Bits of cloth, feathers, and bones dangle, swaying like strange ornaments. Couples sneak away to add their own tokens, pressing them into bark, whispering names or promises. One young woman hangs a lock of hair and her admirer mirrors it with a tooth from his necklace.
Together they step back, watching the tree claim their bond. The forest now holds their secret.
Fact: tree offerings are ancient, with evidence of sacred groves in both prehistoric Europe and Africa. Quirky tidbit: some anthropologists argue that tying gifts to trees was one of the earliest ways humans externalized private vows. Historians still argue whether such offerings were binding contracts or simply symbolic gestures.
The storm you smelled earlier finally breaks. Rain pelts the leaves and thunder cracks overhead. Strangely, the ritual doesn't stop.
Instead, the people cheer, lifting their arms, letting water soak their painted bodies. They dance harder, feet splashing mud, voices lifted against the storm. Couples spin together, laughing, their hair plastered to their faces. It feels raw, chaotic, ecstatic, like the spirits themselves have joined the courtship dance.
One daring pair runs into the downpour, lying flat in the mud.
They smear each other's faces with clay, laughing as they slip and slide.
The crowd hoots approval.
Apparently nothing says romance here like rolling in puddles while lightning flickers above. You make a mental note: forget roses and chocolates, maybe just schedule a date during a thunderstorm. Fact: rain was often considered a fertility symbol, connecting sky and earth. Quirky tidbit: some prehistoric carvings depict rain like lines falling over paired figures, possibly symbolizing unions blessed by weather. Historians still argue whether people scheduled unions with weather cycles in mind or simply interpreted storms as signs. As the storm passes, torches are relit, and the camp smells of wet earth and smoke. The elders close the ritual with one last act. Each couple that succeeded tonight steps forward and is lightly tapped on the shoulders with a branch of leaves. The meaning is simple: the spirits approve. Couples beam with pride, some clutching gifts, others still dripping from rain and mud. You lean back, trying to take it all in. These rituals are less about grand displays and more about harmony, with each other, with the spirits, with the environment. It's love as negotiation, not just between two people but between human and world. You realize how modern weddings, even now, echo these ideas. Parents giving blessings, vows taken before witnesses, symbols carried down aisles. Different costumes, same nervous energy.
The night winds down. Couples sit close, sharing food from steaming baskets, whispering under the trees they decorated earlier.
The elders pack a weightless and drums, leaving their heavy with smoke and rain. Somewhere Laukater breaks the hush and you feel it ripple through the forest like another blessing. You close your eyes, listening to water drip from leaves. For all its strangeness, tonight's ritual feels familiar, because beneath the chants and thunder, it's still about the same thing: two people hoping their bond will last, and everyone else hoping the world will let it. By the time you open your eyes again, the forest has thinned and the ground beneath your feet turns sandy. The smell of salt drifts back into the air, but this isn't the calm shoreline of the earlier shell voyages. No, this place hums with heat and movement.
The people here don't court one another by crossing dangerous waters or whispering under sacred trees.
They do it by showing how much they can give away. It's a festival of food, of generosity, of proving your worth not by what you hoard, but by how much you can set before others.
You follow a procession into the heart of the camp. There a great fire blazes, roasting slabs of meat on wooden spits. Baskets overflow with roasted roots, berries, and honeycombs.
The smell is overwhelming, sweet and savory all at once. Your stomach growls, but you notice the way everyone's eyes are fixed not on the food itself, but on the people offering it. Tonight, the act of giving is the ritual, and the size of your pile might just decide who shares your mat later.
Fact: in many prehistoric and early tribal societies, feasts and food sharing were key to cementing alliances and relationships.
Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found massive pits of animal bones near ancient hearths, suggesting some feasts were on an absurd scale.
Historians still argue whether these were survival-driven events or symbolic displays of abundance tied to courtship.
A young man steps forward, dragging the haunch of a freshly killed deer. He lays it before the crowd with exaggerated effort, puffing out his chest, clearly enjoying the spectacle. He then steps back, watching to see whose eyes linger on his offering. Across the circle, a young woman raises her eyebrows, smirking as if to say, "Really? Just one deer?"
The crowd chuckles, and you almost pity the pobre.
Another man follows, but this one doesn't carry meat. Instead, he brings an enormous woven basket filled to the brim with wild figs. The women gasp. It's not just the amount, but the rarity. Figs don't grow nearby. He must have traveled far or traded cleverly to get them. The young man doesn't even look at the crowd. He simply sets the basket down and returns to his seat, smug in his restraint. You notice a girl sneak a fig from the pile and taste it slowly, her eyes never leaving him.
Fact: food trade networks existed long before farming, with fruits, nuts, and honey moving across surprisingly large distances.
Quirky tidbit: honey is sometimes called humanity's oldest luxury food, used in ritual offerings for thousands of years. Historians still argue whether prehistoric gift foods were chosen for nutrition or symbolic sweetness in romance.
The festival Großluder.
Men and women exchange not just food but little acts of showmanship. One girl brings a basket of roasted insects, daring a boy to eat a handful. He does, grimacing but grinning, and she bursts into laughter. Another young man carves slices of meat into shape spirals, hearts, crude animals, handing them out like edible jewelry. It's playful, ridiculous, and strangely intimate.
At the edge of the feast, elders perform their own role.
They taste the offerings, nodding or grimacing in exaggerated fashion, making the crowd laugh. When they approve, the giver's reputation soars. When they frown, the poor soul gets mercilessly teased.
You realize these rituals aren't just about couples, they're about community deciding who deserves admiration, who shows generosity, and who might be too stingy to trust.
Fact: social approval played a central role in prehistoric bonding rituals. Relationships were often validated or rejected in public. Quirky tidbit: in some Pacific Island traditions, stinginess in feasts could ruin a person's marriage prospects entirely.
Historians still argue whether prehistoric feasts were primarily matchmaking events or seasonal survival strategies dressed in spectacle. The food piles grow ridiculous.
Someone drags in a giant fish, so large it takes 3 men to lift. The crowd howls in delight, chanting his name. But then another bursts forward with a bundle of honeycombs, dripping golden sweetness onto the fire. Flames flare, sending sparks skyward. Children rush forward, sticking their fingers into the melting honey before adults chase them back.
The young man just grins, clearly enjoying the chaos.
Nearby, a couple sits together, their offering small, a single roasted bird. Yet instead of embarrassment, they feed each other tiny bites, laughing quietly.
The crowd watches with softer eyes.
Here, generosity isn't measured by size alone, but by intention. You realize that sometimes the smallest gift, shared intimately, can eclipse a mountain of figs.
Fact: symbolic feeding between partners has been recorded across countless cultures, from prehistoric contexts to modern weddings. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists studying charred seeds in hearths sometimes speculate that shared meals were love tokens in disguise. Historians still argue whether feeding gestures were universally romantic or simply practical acts given meaning later. As night deepens, the feast becomes a game of excess. One man keeps shoving pieces of meat toward a girl until she waves her hands dramatically, pretending to burst. Laukheiter rolls trug the Camp. Another woman throws berries into the crowd like confetti, daring suitors to catch them in their mouths. One lucky boy does, and the cheer that follows could be mistaken for a wedding announcement. The drumming starts, low and steady. People rise, balancing bowls and baskets as they dance. Couples step forward, offering bites to the rhythm of the drums, each movement timed with the beat. The fire throws sparks, painting the night in orange and gold. The air smells of roasting fat and honey, smoke and sweat. You find yourself swaying too, caught in the Weitmar, half dead by the richness of it all. Fact: music, food, and dance often overlapped in prehistoric ceremonies, creating multi-sensory experiences tied to memory and bonding. Quirky tidbit: some archaeologists think ancient feasts doubled as proto-food fights, judging from scattered food remnants and unusual patterns. Historians still argue whether the chaos was intentional celebration or simply the result of too much energy and too little table etiquette. By the firelight you notice the shift. The bravado of giant fish and fig baskets fades, replaced by quieter gestures. Couples slip away with leftovers wrapped in leaves, sharing them privately under trees. A boy carefully peels fruit for a girl, handing her each slice like it's the rarest thing in the world. Another pair sits shoulder to shoulder, sipping broth from the same bowl, their faces lit by the faint glow of embers. The feast, you realize, is both theater and intimacy. First, the public spectacle, who can outdo whom, who dazzles the crowd. Then the private sharing to people lining clothes voice lost in the dark. It's skinny with this courtship, abundance is saturn. You think about modern dinner dates, champagne toasts, elaborate restaurant bills. Different costumes some dance. As the fire dwindles, an elder rises and makes a final declaration. He thanks the spirits for the abundance, praises the givers, and blesses the unions formed tonight. Couples beam, hands intertwined, bellies full, futures uncertain, but for now sweetened by food and laughter. You lean back, your stomach aching from the imagined fest. It strikes you that love here isn't whispered, it isn't chased, it's eaten. And you can't decide if that's strange or just deeply relatable. Maybe romance has always been, at its core, about sharing what nourishes us, whether that's figs, honey, or just a bowl of soup on a cold night. When you wake this time, the smell of smoke still lingers, but it isn't from cooking fires or rain-dampened torches. It's sharper, stranger, mixed with the resin of burning pine and the musky tang of animal fat. Ahead of you, a wide clearing has been prepared for another ritual, but here the focus isn't food or feats of endurance. Tonight, the proof of devotion comes in the form of pain, rituals of scars and tattoos, marks that stay long after the fire burns out. You step closer, they are heavy with anticipation. Young men gather around the fire, their bodies already painted in ochre and ash. Women sit on the sidelines, watching with both fascination and a touch of unease. This isn't the kind of spectacle that makes people laugh or cheer. It's quieter, more serious, almost grim. But the meaning is clear. If you're willing to endure suffering, then your love is true. If you can take the pain, you can take responsibility for a bond. Fact: scarification is one of the oldest human practices, with patterns cut into skin as symbols of identity and status. Quirky tidbit: some of the earliest bone tools may have doubled as blades for making such cuts.
Historians still argue whether prehistoric scar rituals were primarily about beauty, bravery, or spiritual connection.
The first young man steps forward.
His arms are bound with thin vines to steady him. An elder squats before him, holding a sharp flake of obsidian. The crowd hushes. With practiced hands, the elder drags the stone across the man's chest, carving a line that immediately fills with blood. The young man clenches his jaw but does not cry out. His eyes instead lock with those of a girl sitting close to the fire. She doesn't flinch, doesn't look away. This is for her, and everyone knows it. Fact: obsidian blades, sharper than steel, were prized in prehistoric toolkits, and their use in ritual cutting has been inferred from wear patterns. Quirky tidbit: obsidian is so sharp it can slice cells without tearing them, which ironically makes it both terrifying and medically precise. Historians still argue whether its ritual use was chosen for sharpness or symbolic shine. After the cut, the elder rubs ash and clay into the wound. The man hisses, body trembling, but he doesn't move. The ash will leave a scar, turning the wound into a permanent mark. When it heals, he'll carry the line across his chest for the rest of his life, a visible sign of his devotion. The girl smiles faintly, and the crowd murmurs approval. Another man follows, but he asks for something different. He wants a pattern, not just a line. The elder nods and begins pricking his skin with a thorn, dot by dot, dragging soot into each puncture. Slowly, a spiral emerges across his shoulder. It's not just decoration, it's a message. Spirals often symbolize cycles, endless return, or eternity.
Here it's a promise carved into flesh.
Fact: tattooing is at least 5,000 years old, with preserved bodies like Ozzy the Iceman showing patterns of inked skin. Quirky tidbit: soot mixed with fat makes a surprisingly durable ink, still used in some traditional practices. Historians still argue whether tattoos began as decoration, medicine, or ritual bonding.
The women watch closely, whispering among themselves. They weigh not just the bravery but the artistry. Guckt's gar nicht in Vitalizing, a beautiful Spiral, Admiration.
One girl mutters that if her suitor can't sit still for a thorn, he certainly won't survive raising children. The others laugh, hiding their smiles behind their hands. Nearby, a group of young women prepare their own marks. They don't cut flesh, but instead press heated sticks to their skin, leaving small round burns along their arms. The pain is sharp, sudden, and they grit their teeth through it. But when the skin heals, the circles will remain, matching the marks of their chosen partners.
It's less about submission, more about equality, two people marked in the same way, bearing the same memory.
Fact: burn scars have been documented in various early societies as ritual marks, sometimes linked to fertility or group belonging. Quirky tidbit: in some traditions, couples would touch their scars together during ceremonies as proof of shared endurance. Historians still argue whether paired markings were genuine romantic practices or community-enforced symbolism.
The ritual grows louder. Drums pound, voice chant, feet stamp.
Each new scar is celebrated with ululations, each tattoo admired as though it were a treasure. The air is thick with the smell of blood, ash, and burning resin. You half expect someone to faint, but instead the atmosphere sharpens into something electric. Pain, oddly enough, has united them. Then comes the most daring act. A boy no older than 16 steps forward, announcing he will endure a trial of the fire. He kneels before the flame, holding his hand above it until the skin blisters. The crowd gasps, half in horror, half in awe. His eyes water, his teeth grind, but he doesn't pull away. Finally, when the skin turns raw, he lifts his hand, presses it to his chest, and then points directly at a girl. The meaning is clear: he'd burn for her. You can't help but mutter romantic, but maybe just stick to flowers next time. Fact: ritual fire ordeals have appeared across the globe, often as tests of bravery or divine favor. Quirky tidbit: in some cases healed burns were seen as talismans, protecting the bearer from future harm. Historians still argue whether prehistoric fire trials were voluntary or demanded by elders to control young men's choices. The girl he points to rushes forward, dabbing honey onto his burned skin. The crowd erupts, half cheering, half groaning at the sentimentality. But there's no denying the connection. They've sealed something tonight, written in blisters and soot. As the ritual winds down, couples sit together, comparing scars, laughing at each other's grimaces, admiring spirals or circles. Pain has transformed into pride, into beauty, into a story they'll carry forever. You realize that for these people, love isn't about fleeting words or temporary gestures. It's etched into skin, as permanent as bone. Fact: body modification, from piercings to tattoos to scars, has existed across almost every known culture. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists sometimes find preserved remains with paired markings, suggesting couples shared designs. Historians still argue whether these modifications were chosen by individuals or imposed by the group to enforce conformity. As you sit back, you feel the pull of sleep again, lulled not by softness but by the strange comfort of permanence. In a world where everything is fragile, food spoils, storms strike, lives end too soon, marks in skin become anchors. They say, "I was here, I loved, I endured." You wonder if modern tattoos, initials carved in trees, even wedding rings are just echoes of this ancient need to make love visible, tangible, undeniable. The drums fade, the fire dims, but the scars will last. And as you drift, you hear one voice, playful, pert, a little cocky, declare, "Shake and forget me now."
I'm on her arm forever. The crowd laughs, but no one disagrees. By the time you stumble into the next gathering, your ears are still ringing with the memory of pounding drums, and your eyes are haunted by spirals of scar tissue glinting in firelight. Yet tonight feels different. There's no smell of burning flesh or sharp sting of obsidian in the air. Instead, the scent that reaches you first is sweet, herbal, almost floral, drifting on a light breeze. You follow it, stepping into a circle of people seated in quiet formation, the fire at their center glowing low and steady. The mood here isn't about scars or pain, it's about whispers, incantations, and a subtle attempt to bend the unseen forces of the world toward matters of the heart. Welcome to the realm of prehistoric love potions and enchantments. You sink down near the edge of the circle, careful not to interrupt the rhythm. An elder woman is grinding herbs with a stone pestle, her hands steady, her eyes half closed as if she's already halfway in another world. Around her, younger women and men sit with expectant faces, waiting for the mixture to be ready. Tonight, love won't be proven by bravery but conjured through the trickery of ritual, shamanic love spells. Fact: across many cultures, shamans acted not only as healers but also as mediators in relationships, sometimes crafting charms or potions for attraction. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found small carved figurines that might have been used as love dolls, buried near hearths or sleeping spaces. Historians still argue whether prehistoric magic was genuinely believed effective, or whether it was more symbolic social theater. The pestle grinds harder, the herbs release a cloud of fragrance. Someone leans toward you and whispers that the mix includes crushed juniper, dried berries, and a pinch of ash from the last fire. Whether or not it works, it certainly smells potent enough to get someone's attention. A man across the fire begins a low chant, rattling a bundle of hollow bones filled with pebbles. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost like a heartbeat. Each rattle seems to punctuate the woman's grinding motion, as though sound and scent together will coax love itself out of hiding. The crowd hums along softly, their voices layering into a drone that makes your eyelids heavy.
Fact: bone rattles have been uncovered in prehistoric sites, their exact uses debated. Quirky tidbit: some were made from bird bones, chosen for their hollow resonance, possibly linking them to the idea of messages flying between worlds. Historians still argue whether these rattles were primarily used in healing, trance, or courting ceremonies. The elder finally lifts her stone bowl. The mixture glows faintly in the firelight, dark and sticky. She dips her fingers in, smears a streak along her cheek, then hands the bowl to the first young woman waiting eagerly. With shaking fingers, the girl traces a line from her chin to her forehead as if drawing love toward her mind. The boy sitting beside her watches nervously. You almost laugh because the nervous shuffle he makes looks timeless, like every teenager on a first date since forever. One by one, others smear the mixture on their skin, chanting softly, making wishes. Some whisper names under their breath, others simply close their eyes. You catch fragments of the murmurs, pleas for attention, for loyalty, for passion that doesn't fade. You imagine Cupid rolling his eyes from the future, muttering, "You guys are really making this complicated." Then the elder pulls out a carved figurine. It's small, about the length of her palm, with exaggerated features. She cradles it like it's alive, humming into its carved face. She presses herbs to its chest, murmuring words you don't understand, then hands it to a young man. He blushes furiously, but he doesn't refuse. Everyone knows what he's supposed to do: bury the figurine near the sleeping space of the one he loves, binding their spirits together. Fact: figurines like the Venus statues found across Europe may have had multiple uses: fertility symbols, charms, or even love spells. Quirky tidbit: some were deliberately broken before burial, perhaps symbolizing the release of energy. Historians still argue whether these figurines were sacred objects or simply artistic tokens.
The schand große Luder, the fire flasse her, sparks lifting into the night.
The rhythm is intoxicating. You feel your own pulse sinking with the rattle. For a moment, you almost believe something invisible is moving through the circle, weaving between the people, listening to their whispered desires. A girl nearby sighs dramatically, pressing her hands over her heart. Her friends giggle, shushing her as if to keep the spell intact. The boy across the fire sneaks a glance at her, then quickly looks away. If there's magic here, it's less about herbs and rattles, more about the courage ritual gives them, the excuse to finally acknowledge what they want. Fact: ritual ceremonies often provided structured opportunities for young people to pair off, protected by the cover of magic. Quirky tidbit: in some traditions, even a failed spell could serve as a convenient excuse. It wasn't me, it was the spirits. Historians still argue whether shamans manipulated these situations for social harmony or simply rode along with them. The elder raises her arms now, sprinkling the last of the herb ash into the fire. The flames flare green for a heartbeat, then settle. Gasps echo around the circle. Was that just a chemical reaction, copper from the herbs sparking? Or was it something more? Either way, the crowd takes it as a sign. The spell is sealed.
One by one, couples drift away from the fire, pretending they're only going to fetch water or gather sticks. You roll your eyes. Ja, zur Water et mit nicht.
The rest remain, humming softer now, as though winding down from the trance. The elder woman sits heavily, exhausted but content. Her job is done. You realize this is the prehistoric version of a dating app, an algorithm of chants, herbs, and figurines designed to match people without anyone admitting their crush directly. And honestly, it's not so different. Swipe left, swipe right, or smear juniper paste across your face while humming into a bone rattle, whatever works. Fact: many anthropologists note that ritual often served as a socially acceptable script for courtship, letting awkward interactions flow more smoothly. Quirky tidbit: even in modern rural traditions, plants like juniper or sage are still burned during matchmaking festivals. Historians still argue whether these practices genuinely influenced outcomes, or whether people just wanted the confidence boost rituals offered.
The fire dwindles. The Schanzpfade. The sweet herbal standlingers.
You sit back, drowsy, thinking how love always seems to need a little extra push, whether from courage, scars, or whispered spells. Maybe magic isn't about bending the universe. Maybe it's about giving humans permission to say what they're too shy to otherwise. Your eyes close, the last image lingering, the carved figurine pressed gently into the earth, hidden under sleeping skins, waiting to do its silent work. Or maybe just waiting for the couple to finally admit what everyone already knows.
By the time you wander into the final gathering, you can feel the weight of the journey pressing into your bones. You've sat through dances, feasts, scars, tattoos, masks, and whispered spells.
And now here in the cooling night, the people prepare for one last act of devotion, something sharp, glittering, and just a little dangerous. Tonight is about obsidian, the volcanic glass that captures light and shadow in equal measure, a material as beautiful as it is lethal.
Lovers don't exchange rose-sweet poems here. They give each other blades, promising sharp fidelity and a bond that, like obsidian, can cut but never truly dull. The fire burns lower than usual, reflecting off piles of glassy shards laid carefully on woven mats. The edges shimmer with rainbow flecks when the flames dance. Men and women alike lean in, their faces glowing orange, eyes hungry, not for meat or drink but for tokens carved from the earth's fury. Ah, hush, Settles. This isn't play. This is vow-making.
Fact: obsidian was one of the most prized materials in prehistory, sharper than steel, often used for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Quirky tidbit: even modern surgeons sometimes use obsidian scalpels because the edge is finer than metal. Historians still argue whether obsidian blades given in ritual were practical tools or purely symbolic gifts.
A young man steps forward first.
He kneels before an elder who selects a thin blade no longer than a hand. The elder holds it to the fire, letting its edge glow faintly before pressing it into the man's palms. He turns, walks to his partner, and offers it handle first. She accepts, but not without returning the gesture. She pulls a smaller, triangular shard from her pouch and places it in his hands.
There's no kiss, no embrace, just the silent exchange of glass that glints like stars. The crowd murmurs approval.
This, you realize, is their version of a wedding band. Permanent, enduring, costly not in money but in risk. Whoever keeps your blade keeps a part of your soul. Whoever breaks it has broken the bond. And unlike a ring that slips easily onto a finger, this gift can wound.
It demands care, constant attention.
Fact: archaeologists have discovered caches of obsidian far from volcanic regions, evidence of long-distance trade networks across prehistoric Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Quirky tidbit: some blades were deliberately blunted or broken, possibly as ritual divorces. Historians still argue whether these exchanges represented personal vows or were managed by entire clans.
Around the fire, the ritual grows elaborate.
Couples step forward one by one, some exchanging slender knives, others more ornamental pieces shaped into hearts or spirals. A few even cut their palms lightly, pressing them together so that the obsidian edge tastes blood. It's risky, reckless even, but for them, that risk is the point. Love isn't soft, it's sharp, dangerous, and worth bleeding for.
You watch as a girl hesitates, blade in hand.
Her partner extends his, waiting. She breathes deeply, then presses her shard into his palm. The crowd exhales, a shared sigh of relief. For a moment, you think, well, at least it's not a crocodile dung sunscreen this time. And then you remember you'd actually prefer the sunscreen. At least that didn't slice arteries.
Fact, in many ancient cultures, blood rituals symbolized unity, with the idea that mingling blood made people kin. Quirky tidbit: obsidian cuts so finely that wounds sometimes take longer to clot, leaving dramatic trails. Historians still argue whether blood was always necessary in these rituals, or whether it was an optional flourish for the bold. The atmosphere sharpens with each exchange. There's a kind of electric silence, punctuated by the occasional crackle of fire or hiss of a cut finger. Each pair that steps forward seems both braver and more fragile, tied together by slivers of stone that could cut them apart as easily as bind them. You notice that elders also take part. A gray-haired woman steps forward, handing her partner a small obsidian pendant. He slips it over his neck, then presses a matching shard against her hand. They smile softly, the crowd cheering louder for them than for the younger pairs. Maybe because everyone sees it, theirs is proof that obsidian vows can endure a lifetime without shattering. Fact, pendants and beads made from obsidian have been found in burial sites, suggesting they were treasured objects. Quirky tidbit: sometimes the beads were intentionally cracked before burial, symbolizing the release of the bond in death. Historians still argue whether these objects were personal keepsakes or markers of clan alliances. The ritual builds to a climax. A great obsidian disc is lifted into the firelight, its polished surface catching every flicker. The elders place it in the center of the circle. Couples approach, touching their smaller blades to it, adding their vows to the collective. It's like a communal registry, except carved in volcanic glass rather than paperwork. The symbolism is clear: private promises are bound by public recognition. You lean back, imagining how fragile these vows are, sharp enough to slice skin, brittle enough to shatter if dropped. And maybe that's the point. Love for them is never guaranteed. It demands effort, vigilance, care. Just like carrying a shard of obsidian in your pouch, ignore it and you'll bleed. Cherish it and it shines forever. Fact: obsidian's fragility made it both revered and feared, prized for its perfection, dreaded for its tendency to snap. Quirky tidbit: some myths describe obsidian as frozen lightning captured from storms. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people saw it as a divine material or simply an exotic commodity. The fire dwindles and the circle begins to disperse. Lovers tuck their shards safely into leather wraps, some wearing them on cords around their necks, others hiding them under sleeping furs. The obsidian disc is carefully covered, saved for the next season. The night grows quiet, leaving only the occasional spark and the faint hum of satisfied voice. You realize this is the final chapter of your strange journey. From awkward firelight dances to mammoth feasts, from scarified chests to juniper love spells, it's all been a long experiment in proving, signaling, or binding affection. Love was never simple, even back then. It was always tangled in ritual, risk, and sometimes a little absurdity. But maybe that's exactly what makes it universal. You let your eyes close, the shimmer of obsidian still behind your eyelids. For once, you feel no need to joke. There's a quiet beauty in this final image, a circle of people, promising themselves to each other not with words, but with sharp, fragile gifts that demand both bravery and tenderness. And that, you think, is as prehistoric and as modern as love ever gets. Learn now, as the last flames of the obsidian fire fade into embers, your journey through these ancient rituals drifts to its end. The clearing grows still. The chants have gone quiet, the drums are silent, and even the air feels softer, cooled by the long night. You settle into the silence, letting your breathing slow to match the of the faint crackle of dying wood. You picture all the scenes you've walked through, the first awkward dances in flickering caves, the feasts heavy with mammoth marrow, the spiral tattoos etched in skin, the whispers of charms carried on smoke.
Each memory drifts past like smoke rings, fading gently upward, leaving only warmth in their wake. Your mind softens, letting go of sharp obsidian edges and lingering scars. Instead, it holds only the tenderness that underlay all those strange practices, the simple, stubborn desire to connect, to belong, to say, I choose you, in whatever language, gesture, or ritual was possible. Love in the Ice Age wasn't so different from love now. It was clumsy, it was risky, it was beautiful.
The firelight dims completely.
Our cool hush settles. You imagine yourself laying beneath a blanket of stars na world's news is the eternal night sky stretching up over.
The constellations shimmer faintly, like ancient carvings guiding you toward rest. Your breath deepens. Your muscles soften.
The prehistoric voices fade into whispers, and then even those whispers dissolve into quiet. You are safe. You are still. And as sleep folds over you like a heavy fur cloak, you carry with you the gentle truth that even in the earliest times, love found a way.
Good night. Sleep well.